If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
What's the scariest true paranormal encounter or haunting you've had at 3 a.m. the devil's hour, when the veil is thinnest between worlds?
Lady in White. About 2 years ago, I worked in a kitchen that had a basement for storing all the frozen items. The employees who worked there before me told me that the building and the entire street of buildings were haunted and had underground tunnels running throughout the town. The restaurant owners filled in about 5 feet of the tunnel, which dates back to the 1800s. Well, I ended up having to work a late shift until 12 a.m. They stayed open until 3 a.m. on weekends. I went down to the basement to get some fries and onion rings. When I opened the freezer door, I felt a chill down my spine and a tingling sensation all over my body, yelling, "Get out of there." When I shut the freezer door, I saw a lady in a white dress going behind the wall that separates the other half of the cellar. I heard a voice telling me to go over there, but because I'm used to have had several inaccuracies happen already at this point as well as seen several ghost movies, I said, "Duck this, I'm out." I proceeded to the stairs when I felt the urge to turn around. What I saw was the lady in white rushing towards me, causing me to run up the stairs being chased and slamming the door behind me. The coworkers I told about this all told me it's funny, normally it's the man that's the violent one, not the lady in white. It's been 2 years since then, but due to COVID, I lost my car and now have to walk to work, different job, but the last 2 days, I've been seeing the lady in white, sometimes walking behind me but always staying 30+ foot away no matter how fast I walk/run. Whistling at 2:30 a.m. I live in a house that I can't find much history of. All I know is that when my parents moved in, they found a pelvic bone and dirty magazines in the wall of the bathroom. Growing up, I have always seen a female spirit with long black hair, a pale body, and around 5 feet 6 inches. I see her walking around the hallway, sitting in my old room, and all that sort of stuff. My mom has seen this too. She said she always thought it was me, and I and this spirit are pretty similar looking. My mom would always tell me she would walk past my room at night and see her sitting on the edge of my bed or would see her in the corner of her eye. This has been going on for 15 years since we first moved in. I've gotten used to the spirit and don't see her as much lately, but this is what freaks me out. For the last 2 weeks I've been hearing whistling. The whistling starts between 2:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. The first time this happened, I was lying in bed on my phone. Suddenly, the whistling started. It sounded like a grown man was whistling outside my house. My house has only one neighbor on one side, while the other side is an empty lot filled with dirt and bushes. My room is at the front of the house. The window shows a view out the front of my house, where there is a field. After a minute I built up the courage to look outside the window. Nothing was there, but it got extremely quiet. The whistling stopped. I got back into bed, and it started again, sounding closer. After a few minutes the whistling stopped. The same thing happened every night at the same time, but I don't look out the window anymore. I have a feeling not to, like something is telling me it's not okay to look. Last night was different. As I was preparing for that whistling to start again, suddenly I heard a bang on the roof, followed by footsteps. This lasted a minute. As soon as I thought it was over, I heard footsteps outside my window. I lay still and physically could not move. I felt a negative energy, and something wasn't right. That's when my dog walked in and looked at the window. She normally is a loud dog and will bark when she hears noises and try and investigate. However, the look on her face made me even more scared. She jumped onto my bed and cuddled me. My dog has been very quiet today and will not go near my window. I have no idea what this is or what it wants. If anyone has any ideas or anything, please let me know. I am a person who picks up on energy very easily and can feel presences, so maybe this is why I am the only one who is experiencing this in my house, but whatever this is, I want it gone and want to know what it is. My neighbor died, and now there are shadow figures in my apartment. A month ago my neighbor passed away in her sleep. She was kind and always made a point to say hi to everyone and wish everyone a blessed day. She even went out of her way to wish me a Merry Christmas when I got home from the hospital last year on Christmas Eve. After her passing, weird things started happening, and it's not just in my apartment. My other neighbors, there are 8 households in our building, have all experienced weird things. It started with hearing someone shuffle up and down my hallway, which I believed was my roommate at the time. I found out later that he wasn't ever home at night because he worked overnights during that month, so it wasn't him. Once my roommate moved out, the activity got weirder and weirder. I started hearing someone knock on the door every morning at 3 a.m. We would check, and no one would be there. At first we thought we were being ding-dong ditched until we heard a knock, went to go check, saw no one, and then as we were closing the door, heard the knock again. The door was still partially open, so we knew it wasn't anyone else. After that, I started having trouble sleeping. Even now I only sleep 2 hours a night if I'm lucky. Because of this, I'm usually the witness of it all. I think whatever is here knows that. I've heard doors opening and closing, my window sliding open, and my drawers on my dresser slamming shut. The most profound experience occurred when my fiancé and I were about to go to bed, and while we hadn't turned off the light yet, a shadow figure suddenly ran into our room and headed straight for the closet. We both sat, frozen in fear, and watched the closet for a few minutes. Once we calmed down, he lay down, and in between us, we heard someone whisper, "What are you doing tomorrow?" Clear as day. The weird thing about all of these events is that I know the shadow and the things happening aren't my neighbor, but they all started when she died. My neighbors say they hear knocking and running, too. They didn't say anything about ghosts. They all said it's probably some kids ding-dong ditching. I just don't think it's people doing it. Even as I'm typing this, I hear loud footsteps in the hallway. There's no one here. I have the door open. I don't see anyone. I'm honestly terrified. I think we're being haunted by something, but it's far too creepy and evil feeling to be my nice neighbor. I thought it was her dad. For starters, I'm not sure I believe in ghosts or whatever anymore because I don't want to scare myself, but here is my story. This happened during lockdown in 2020. I was at my friend's apartment. She still lives with her parents. This will be important. I was staying there for, 2 weeks because of my family problems. I and my now ex-friend, let's call her V, mostly hung around in her room or in the living room that had a big TV we played games on or watched videos. I got offered good food made by her dad, who was a chef. Her father also enjoyed joking around, such as standing behind doors and shouting to startle us as we passed by, or sneaking up behind us in an attempt to scare us. One night we were up late, probably doing anything except studying for a math test. We played games on the TV in the living room. It was about 3 a.m., and I needed to go to the bathroom. I went up and stepped through the doorframe to enter the hallway where the bathroom was. In the corner of my eye, I saw a tall shadow man. I thought it was V's dad and calmly turned around and saw nothing there. I looked up at the wall where I thought somebody stood. I didn't think much of it and went to the bathroom. When I came back, I walked by the doorframe, still nobody there, and finally came back to the living room and told V. We thought it was weird. Then she explained that when the apartment building was new and workers were here to build everything up, one guy hanged himself in her room right by the window. What? I'm just sleeping right under the window, great. I showed V where I saw the man and also tried to explain the height. She noticed how tall I described him, that he was almost at the ceiling. I didn't pay that much attention, though, because I thought it was her dad, who is way taller than me. I'm very short. It would make sense he is tall if he hung himself. Then V also told the story about an old lady who had escaped the concentration camps and died here years ago. V can still smell her perfume when she is walking up the stairwells. So this place is pretty haunted. Does anyone know what kind of ghost it is? Strange lady singing. This is a super creepy story that happened to me last year. My fiancé, 1-year-old, and I used to live in a little house in the middle of nowhere. Seriously, there was a cotton field to our right and back and a pecan orchard to our front and left with the road on the other side of the orchard. No neighbors within a half mile or more. One night, around 2 or 3 a.m., my fiancé came to bed late after practicing music on the back porch. Since he is a musician, this detail is relevant. I was already lying awake, so we started talking. We were talking for about 30 minutes when we both heard a woman singing right outside our window, which our bed leaned against. She was humming a kind of creepy anti-Vietnam War song we both know. It's called Luong Prabang by Dave Van Ronk if anyone wants to hear. We froze in place and were both speechless. The singing continued for about 15 seconds while we just stared at one another. We look out the window, and nobody is there. I expected to see someone because we heard the singing so clearly. The thing is, it was like whisper singing, and we heard it clearly from inside. It's not like we heard singing from far off in the distance. It was so clear. He ran outside to try and see if there was someone on the property but didn't find anyone. He was super freaked out because the song we heard was the song he had just been practicing outside. The house was built in the mid-60s. We had several creepy encounters, but that one was the most vivid. It freaks me out still to this day when I think about it. Any cryptid experiences from anyone in the southeast US? Preferably Georgia? I ask this because I don't know exactly how to explain two experiences I've had in the past few years. Both experiences occurred very late at night and took place in a small, rural area located within approximately 10 miles of each other. This first one happened a few years back at my old house, at around 3 a.m. I walk outside on my porch because of a noise I heard outside. I felt pretty safe because of how high up the porch was, and I was right next to the door if there was anything dangerous. I walk out, and I have the porch lights on, and just in the woods, right where the light ends, is something I can barely make out. It's much thicker than the average dog, and I couldn't make out many more features on it. It could have been crouched or just on all fours. And I could tell it was staring at me. I was pretty shook, so I turned around and went back inside. The second incident occurred approximately 6 months ago at my new house, which is located about 15 minutes away from my previous one. This new house is in an actual town, but the town itself is pretty rural and small. So it's again super late at night, and I decide that I want to walk up the street to a drink machine that's a little ways from my house. Now on the way back from the machine, I hear what sounds like a deer being absolutely slaughtered by something. I mean, this thing sounded terrible, and it freaked me the duck out, and safe to say, I picked up the pace to get back to my house. Here is some information about the area where I live. I live about 30 minutes to an hour southwest of the Georgia/South Carolina border, just outside of Augusta, Georgia, and we don't have bears around here from what I know. I've never seen one, and I've never heard of anyone seeing one near my town. The biggest known predator around my town is the coyote, and it's rare for a coyote to take down a deer, especially a grown one. Could it have just been a bear? Or could there be something more unexplained in the woods here in Georgia? Was I hallucinating? I'm still not sure to this day. One night, I was sick and home alone with the kids. It was an overall crappy day, and I was running a bit of a fever around 104 or so, lying on the couch watching TV. I was tired but far too sore to get to sleep. When I get sick, I run fevers a lot and know they are ultimately for the better, so long as I don't break 104.5, because from there I usually shoot right to 106, and that's when it can be dangerous. At that time, we were living in a trailer. The front door opened into the living room to the right and the kitchen to the immediate left. From the kitchen, a hallway led to both the bathroom and the kids' room. My children were, to my knowledge, playing in their room. Things got quiet, and I figured they were either asleep or just watching TV quietly. Either way, they weren't breaking things or fighting, and I was grateful for that. At about 3 a.m. I had finally just fallen asleep when I was jolted awake by my daughter. She shook my arm to wake me up. For some reason, I didn't even get the slightest bit angry. Normally this would have pissed me right off, though, I wouldn't have yelled at her, as it's not her fault I was sick. Anyway, she told me she was awake because she was so very thirsty she can't stand it. This was my then 4-year-old daughter telling me this. So, I got up, walked into the kitchen, and poured her a large glass of cold water. She downed the whole thing rapidly, which at the time didn't strike a chord, but now I think about it. I couldn't even have drunk it that fast. As if she just poured it out. However, the floor wasn't wet or anything. So, after her drink, I put my hand on her shoulder and walked her back to her room. The hall was dimly lit by the kitchen light being on, and some light spilled into the kids' room. We got to the doorframe, and immediately to the left was her bed, and in the corner opposite the door was my son's bed. The TV was on, but the screen was blue and dimmed. So, I had enough light to be able to see my son, sleeping all contorted on his bed per usual, and my daughter sound asleep in her bed as well. My entire body went numb as my daughter was standing right next to me as I stood in the doorway. I looked from my real daughter sleeping in bed to the child next to me, who still looked like my daughter. She took 3 steps into the room, turned, and smiled while waving and slowly disappearing. I was honestly numb with fear but cautiously angry at the fact that there was something in my children's room that may or may not be dangerous or hostile. My protective instinct was stronger than my fear, and I walked right to the spot the child disappeared in. There was no tingly feeling other than what was left from my initial shock and no cold feeling. I've experienced quite a few paranormal things throughout my life and have a fairly good understanding of what to do to deal with most things. Honestly, to this day I'm not sure if I was hallucinating due to the fever, which normally I don't hallucinate until hitting 105 or higher, or if it really was something paranormal. Either way, the image of my altar daughter smiling, waving, and slowly disappearing from my sight still haunts me to this day, badly. 3 a.m. visitor. My mother had an experience I'd like to share from a few weeks ago. For a little background, over the past 6 weeks, my father has been undergoing various medical tests, such as blood work, CT scans, MRIs, and multiple biopsies, to determine why he is experiencing so much stomach and back pain. Early blood work indicated pancreatic cancer, and the doctor just confirmed this week that he has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. My whole family has been a mess during this process. It's a lot to digest and seems to be a pretty aggressive cancer. So about 3 weeks ago, my mom woke up in the middle of the night, around 3 a.m., to a sound coming from downstairs in the kitchen. She said it was a loud, repetitive banging sound from the floor. The kitchen floor is made of a slate tile, so it has a distinctive sound when being hit. She said the sound reminded her of metal hitting the floor. It would bang about 6 times in a row, then stop for 10-ish seconds. Then, another 6 bangs would occur, followed by 10 seconds of silence, and this pattern would continue. My mom said that the sound went on for a couple minutes while she was trying to wake up my dad. She felt extremely frightened throughout the entire experience. Her first thought was that it was an intruder. However, after noticing that the noise remained in the same location and followed a consistent pattern of noise and silence, she began to believe it was supernatural. He's a heavy sleeper, so it took her a few minutes of shaking him to wake him up. Finally, he woke up, and the banging noise stopped. She told him to listen for the noise, and it just never happened again. After not hearing a peep, they decided to check the house to make sure it wasn't an intruder. They checked every room in the house and found no evidence of a break-in or of what could make that noise. Has anyone had a similar experience or have any thoughts on what that noise was? In hindsight, my mom really feels like it was the Grim Reaper signaling that he's coming for my dad. The creek in my hometown. When my husband and I were young, we used to go down by this creek that ran through our town. The town was relatively small, with woods encircling the creek and bridge. We would hang out just off the bridge on the grass, almost under it, just to drink or smoke or hang out. It's a pretty popular spot. One particular time we were there around 3 a.m. It was midsummer, and the streetlights were on, nobody was around. I remember this because we were keeping an eye out for cops. We were sitting down on the grass just outside from being under the bridge, and we heard this huge slap on the water. Like someone threw something seriously heavy into the water, like someone threw something off the bridge. There was no one around, no ripples in the water. At first my husband said it was probably an animal that fell in. I mentioned how there were no ripples. At this point I was completely freaking out, and I wanted to leave. He was still calm, wanting to stay. Then it happened again a couple minutes later. And my husband books it. I mean, this MF runs like I've never seen him run before. He says he thought I was right behind him. Okay, sure. Anyways, we still got married even though he ditched me at 3 a.m. while something was dumping bodies into the creek. But seriously, we have no idea what it was. I still think about when we drive over that bridge. Another odd thing that happened at that creek. My friend and I were sunbathing off the creek. You had to walk pretty far into the woods to get to this little beach. There are some nice little beaches, more rocks than sand, off the creek that you can set up a nice fire or whatever on. We were far away from the bridge and the road, with nobody around and no houses, nothing. Within 10 minutes of lying down, we hear someone yell, "Get out of there!" really loudly. We both just sit up and look at each other. Before we could say anything or do anything, they said it again, "You have to get out of there." So we listen. As we're packing up, we're looking everywhere, up in the trees, across the creek. We see no one. We ran out of those woods so fast. I did look back because I thought I'd see one of our friends just screwing with us, or at least some flipping weirdo darting behind trees, but I saw absolutely nothing. 3 knocks around 3 a.m. Hey everyone, I'm new here. But I just wanted to share what has been recently happening to me so that I can get some answers. I've been smoking weed for about 2 years now, and I am actually a month sober in hopes of reconnecting with myself and who I was before I started to smoke. For the past week I have been waking up between 3:40 a.m. and 4 a.m. with a feeling that someone is watching me. I looked up the symptoms I've been having, and the internet says that it is anxiety. I know that marijuana withdrawal can also have symptoms of anxiety, so I thought that's what it was. However, I have experienced this once, precisely at 2 a.m. a few months ago. Fast forward to about 4 days ago, I woke up around 3:40 a.m. with an intense feeling that someone was watching me. I quickly turned the lights on and lay in bed. 5 minutes later I heard 3 knocks at my bedroom door, and I was completely frozen with fear. I felt paralyzed, I didn't answer or get up. Just laid there and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Since then I have been sleeping peacefully, and I forgot about it. Last night, I went to my boyfriend's house, and we were lying in bed around 12 a.m., and he goes, "Hey babe, I forgot to tell you that the weirdest thing happened to me last night." Then he begins to say that around 3 a.m. he woke up to 3 knocks at his bedroom door. Keep in mind I never told him what happened. We're both really young and in college, so we both live with our parents. The way his room and door are set up, he would be able to see shadows of feet if it was his mother, but there was no one at the door. He says that he never answered the door or responded in any way after he heard the knocks. I tell him that the same thing happened to me the other day, and he says not to worry about it and to brush it off. I'm absolutely freaked out. Please let me know what you guys think. I want to mention that I have been seeing angel numbers since February and believe I am experiencing a spiritual awakening, which makes it difficult for me to dismiss the idea that, according to my recollection, 3 knocks signify demons. Guys, I'm totally freaked. Advice? The entity who used to visit me at night as a child. When I was a boy, I used to endure the odd strange experience, but this one was by far the most frightening. This occurred during the early 90s, in the years between 1993 and 1994, so I was about 3 or 4 years of age. I only vaguely remember any of this, but my father every once in a while never fails to bring it up and remind me there's more to this world than what we see with our eyes. To him the event happened as if it were yesterday. My father told me there was once a period of time when I was a child that I used to run out of my room in the dead of night to my parents' room, where he and my mother would be sleeping. I would burst into their room frantically screaming, "Daddy! Daddy! I'm seeing monsters, there are monsters in my room." My father, being a very religious, spiritual man and no stranger to seeing some weird shit growing up in his homeland of Africa, would take me by the hand and back into my room to show me there was nothing there. He would turn on the light, say a prayer for good measure, and tell me everything is fine, but I would always refuse to go back to sleep in my room, and I would beg to stay in my parents' room for the remainder of the night until he obliged. This same scenario happened another 3 times, and on the last time, my father had finally had enough and took me back into my bedroom and decided to stay with me for the night to see what, if anything, was tormenting me like this. I ended up falling asleep not long afterwards. My childish brain was probably assuming I was safe now that my father was staying with me. Only around 20 minutes had passed when my father first saw it. The light was on, and my father said he saw a huge black mass that reached the ceiling, and it had the shape of a very tall man. He was in complete shock at the sight of this thing and actually tried to move suddenly. He immediately noticed his whole body was paralyzed. As if whatever the thing was had inflicted some sort of self-induced paralysis on him. The entity then turned around slowly and revealed, where my father assumed its head was, 2 small bright red lights, which my father assumed were its eyes. My father was scared witless but shook off his fears, coming to the realization that it was most probably this horrible entity who had been troubling me, his son. Anger then replaced fear, and my father, with all his will and might, tried to break out of his paralyzed state when suddenly the entity turned again and walked out of the room. It was extremely surreal. The most disturbing part of this to me was this. Our rooms were all upstairs in our house. My father told me that after the entity left the room, he heard its footsteps walking down the stairs, accompanied by the creaking of the steps. For some reason, that part of the story always gives me chills. I have in my later life experienced some strange occurrences, but not of this magnitude. I have found that I have quite an active 6th sense. For example, I am sensitive to people's energy and can tell if they are a good or bad person. Or just having sharp instincts and intuition and finding that when I heed them, positive things happen to me, and when I don't, negative things seem to follow. I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw an old lady smiling at me sitting on my desk. Okay, so this morning I woke up to something that scared the living shit out of me. It was around 3 a.m., maybe 3:47 a.m., and I had woken strangely. Now, I say this after a big night staying up till 11, so usually I'll sleep all night, but for some reason I woke up to a feeling as if someone was near me or someone was in my presence, and as soon as I woke up I was staring directly at an old lady who was sitting on my desk. I could see her pretty clearly, and she was easy to see with the dim hallway light shining on her. At first I thought it may have been my chair, as it had clothes on it and looked like it, but as adrenaline kicked in, I realized she was far from it and was actually sitting on my desk. She had gray hair, though it looked all blue in the hallway light. She had a smile on, and it was quite creepy. It looked as though she had some teeth missing. Now at first I thought it was my mom. She had the exact same nightgown as my mom, so I was going to shout "Mom," but I quickly realized that it couldn't have been, as the lady on the desk had darker skin. Usually I have a knife or gel blaster beside my bed. I intended to use one. But I realized they weren't there, and I had left them outside. I considered all my options, maintained eye contact with her for at least 1 minute while still smiling, and decided to get up and approach her. I did so, and seconds later, she disappeared. It was like as soon as I changed angles, she left, but it couldn't have been that, as I saw her lying down and then saw her as I perched up. I don't get scared often, so this was weird for me but also gave me the creeps. Everything happened in such perfect timing. I woke up at 3 a.m., stared at her, the light revealed her appearance, and as I approached her, she disappeared. It was later really strange. I live in Australia and told my mom about the story. She said that the person I encountered might have been an Aboriginal. My mom and dad have had similar experiences in the past, and this is the second time this year this has happened to me. Last time I noticed someone on the edge of my bed. I might share that story later. If you live in Australia and have had a similar experience, it would be good to hear it. Thanks. 3 a.m. Disembodied voices. I live in a trailer on a corner lot, and my bedroom window looks right out to a streetlight. Now during the day it's not unusual for people who are out walking to stop there and chat with someone else, so after living here for 10 years I know what it sounds like when someone is there talking. About 2 months ago I had my headphones on watching videos, but when I got up to use the bathroom, I could make out 3 different male voices whispering from outside. I couldn't make out what was being said, and out of curiosity and nervousness, I took a sneak peek through my blinds, and to my surprise, no one was under or even near the light, but the whispers continued for at least 5 minutes. I never heard any footsteps walking away or any cars driving by. Was someone out there hiding, trying to scare me, and it was just a coincidence that it was 3 a.m.? Or did I hear something paranormal talking beneath the only light around? The man in the road. I currently live in the Manchester area, UK, and I stay up relatively late, 3 or 4 a.m. I always close my curtains and windows quite early, around 7 or 8, however, on this particular night it was warm, and I wanted to get some air through the house, so I left them open longer. I ended up watching some videos, and it got late, so I headed to bed. I walked into my room and realized the curtains were open, and so was the window. This was 2:30 a.m. I proceeded to close the window and the curtains, however, I stopped and stared out for a little, not sure why. Never seen the streets so quiet, so mystical, it was bewildering. I stood there for a few minutes until I saw a single person walking down the street, not sure where he was from or how he got there. He looked like a small, pale old man, wearing a small top hat like a bull hat. Full suit like from the series Peaky Blinders. It is the best I can describe. He started crossing the road and stopped. I was still looking at this point. What was an old man doing out at 3 a.m. in the morning? He slowly turned directly into my window and watched. As I was shocked, I quickly ducked out of sight. I was there for a little while, I peeked up, and he was still staring in the middle of the road. A few seconds later, which felt like an eternity, I got the confidence to peek back up, he was still watching. Giving up, I realized he had already seen me. So I crawl out of sight and walk normally to the window just to hopefully make him think I wasn't watching him. It's very unnerving at that time of night, however, this time he was gone. It's a main road, it would have taken him a lot longer to walk over, and then I can still see down the whole road. He was absolutely nowhere. Shops closed on both sides. Then the worst experience in my life happened. I heard a knock on the door, 3 very distinct knocks that will never leave my mind. Thud, thud, thud. I did not answer. Another louder knock. Thud, thud, thud. I did not answer, who would at that time? Again, louder. Bang, bang. Bang. I did not answer, and then silence. I peeked down my stairs to the front door. My house has a sensor at the front door. When someone arrives, the porch light turns on. It was pitch black. I slowly try to look through the window panel in the door. Nothing, no one was there. A cold breeze slowly crawling up the stairs. I return to my room and lie on my bed for hours. I finally managed to drift off, with no idea how long I was asleep for before something I have never experienced before happened. I feel a breath in my ear, and a whisper follows. Enjoy your stay. I can't explain it. The only thing I can think of is sleep paralysis caused me to hear a voice due to the events that night. I am still in the same house, and nothing else has happened since, and I am thankful for that. Never again. This story took place nearly 3 years ago when I was at a party at my friend's house, and as it approached 3 a.m., most of the guests found rides home and began to leave. I and a couple of others stayed back to continue drinking and shit, as the night was still young, right? We began talking about our worst fears and horror movies that petrified the shit out of us, so as you can imagine, the atmosphere was building up. After sharing a few chilling tales from classic urban legends, we made the decision to end the evening and make our way home. I opted to drive since it was only a few blocks away, and I was reluctant to leave my new vehicle there overnight. So I did the usual things that people do when they're really scared, such as checking the backseat and playing overly happy radio songs, before heading on my way. A few streets away from my house is a part of the neighborhood that gets really dark and eerie and just seems cut off from the rest of the world. Don't ask me why I took this route. As I turned the corner around one of the streets, I saw an old, hunched woman with one of those 4-legged walking aids, and she slowly started crossing the road. Initially, I didn't think much of it and simply slowed down my car to ensure she had ample time to cross the road before I reached her. She began walking slower. And slower. And slower until my bonnet was roughly 10 feet away from her and I had to stop completely to avoid hitting her. I couldn't see a face, as her hair was like a scraggly black veil covering her face, but God knows I saw those eyes. Her eyes were indescribable. They appeared black and hollow, yet they seemed capable of piercing through my soul. She stopped walking altogether in the middle of the road and slowly turned her head sideways to look directly at me. At this stage I was planning to just plant my foot and swerve around her, but I felt glued to my position and just hoped that she continued walking. This is the part of the story where I can still remember the exact sound even though it's the last thing I want to keep in my mind, her laugh. She started with a low murmuring, where at first I thought she may have just been cussing at me under her breath, but it developed into this deep, sadistic laugh, which seemed to echo through my body, and it still chills me to the bone to this day. It felt like an invisible weight seemed to finally lift off my body, and I could manage to plant my foot down. I swerved up to the side, mounted the curb, and probably missed a lamp post by millimeters but still managed to nope the duck out of there. I looked back in my rearview mirror when I was further up the road, and for the life of me, I couldn't see her anywhere. I don't know what happened that night. I don't know what I encountered that night. But I can safely say I will never drive that part of the neighborhood at night again. Mimic. So I'm going to talk about two experiences. The first is my mother's experience, and the second is my own. This first one happened sometime in my middle school years, and I would walk home on my own. Feeling tired from school, I would usually come home and sleep right away, but this time as I was walking in, my mom stopped me. Looking frantic, she asked me where I had gone. Now my mom is a forgetful and anxious person, so assuming this was another episode, I was ready to brush her off. I started to explain to her I was at school, like I normally would be at that time of day. Now looking more confused, she tells me she saw me in my room not too long ago. She then explains that she went to my room to look for something, and then she saw what she thought was me. Just to clarify, my mom was standing at the doorway and was only able to see the back of my head. She greets me and asks if I'm hungry and how school was, but fake me doesn't respond. Assuming I'm in a mood, she leaves. Initially I was uncomfortable after she told me this, but I soon forgot about it. Now, I will share my experience, which occurred around the same time as the first one. Around this time I would wake up in the middle of the night, most of the time around 3 a.m., and I was comfortable with it by this point. I would walk around outside / get some water, then go back to sleep. I wake up again. I'm thirsty, so I head to the kitchen. A little background, my mom also had insomnia. She'd also be up around this time, not always but sometimes. As I'm walking over, I notice that all the lights are off, which is strange because my mom always keeps the lights on when she is awake, and then I see some movement at the corner of my eye. I look over and see what I fully trusted to be my mom. I mean, it was her height, size, and hair. It moved like her. A little startled, I say, "Hi, Mom," while keeping my pace. I continued, but while I was walking away, I noticed two things. My mom is the type of person who makes a lot of noise doing the smallest things. The strangest thing was I didn't hear anything from her. She didn't say anything, and she didn't even make walking noises even though she wears loose flip-flops. The second thing I noticed was that I startled her, which isn't that strange, but when she jerked a bit, she knocked something plastic over, literally the only sound I heard from her, and she picked it up. Still relaxed, I got my water and started to walk back. That's when I noticed that she wasn't standing where she was before. In fact, I couldn't spot her at all, but I didn't hear her walking around. So I looked around for her and found nothing. I even called out to her but got nothing. Then I walked over to my parents' room and looked in, and to my disbelief, she was sound asleep, snoring and all tucked in blankets. She would have to walk past me to get to her bed, but I didn't see her or even hear her. Horrified but trying to think rationally, I could only think someone broke in, so I walked the house and found nothing changed. No windows / doors open, also, very creaky doors / windows, so I should have heard it open. 7-foot tall shadow silhouette in my bedroom. What do I do? Preface: I live with my wife in a home we recently purchased around 6 months ago. I have never encountered a situation like this before and am uncertain about the appropriate course of action, if any. Last night at approximately 3:45 a.m. CST, I woke up suddenly, rolled over, and saw a 7 feet tall dark silhouette standing over my wife's side of the bed. I flinched and jumped out of bed, took my eyes off the being for probably half of a second, and it had disappeared. There was nothing there that could have been mistaken for what I saw, i.e., a coat rack or anything of the sort. It was dark, no lights were on, and I had just woken up from sleeping. However, my eyes were adjusted to the darkness, and whatever it was seemed far darker than anything else in the room. Like a solid black, as if you drew a solid Sharpie figure on a dark gray piece of paper. The silhouette was very tall and had no details on its body or face, no hair, no ears, no impressions for eyes. It looked three-dimensional, as I could make out a radius around the dome of the head and neck. It had broad shoulders as opposed to a lot of similar reports I've seen online. It looked slightly hunched over and was staring directly at me. I say this because it looked like it had a small forward tilt to its head. I saw its full body from where I imagine its knees were. Its midsection tapered slightly inward from the broadness of the shoulders, and from the waist down it looked the same, with no gaps of shadow between where its legs would have been, as if it were wearing a cloak that draped down to its feet. All a deep, solid black color. I looked at it for about 2 seconds before I jumped up. I noticed it immediately when I rolled over but didn't understand what I was seeing until after a moment or two. I suspect my delayed reaction was due to the fact that I was asleep shortly before and had to get my bearings on what was happening. I have no idea what it was or what to do. I remained awake for about an hour afterward before I fell back asleep. I wake up for work at 6 a.m. If anyone has seen this or if you have any advice for how I should handle this, please message me. I mentioned to my wife only that I saw something strange last night and that she should tell me if she sees anything odd in the future. I don't want to scare her. It certainly scared the hell out of me. We encountered the entity on the roof. This incident happened to me about 4 or 5 years ago while I was living in a major metropolitan area of the Pacific Northwest. My wife and I lived in a condo on the second floor of this oldish, 2-story building. While my wife was away in Texas for the extended weekend, unusual occurrences began happening in our residence. I first heard footsteps on the roof the first night I was by myself. Mind you, these sounded like stomps and not like little feet, just in case you thought it might have been a raccoon, possum, or any other night creature. The footsteps were loud, as if someone was running in circles just above my bed. It really freaked me out, but I ignored it. The following night, my sister and mom stayed the night because they were visiting from just a few towns over. That night, I let my mom and sister sleep in the room, and I slept on the couch. My sister and my mom heard the stomps too. They didn't know what to make of it. So they woke me up to go check the roof. I ventured outdoors to investigate but found nothing. We still had no idea what the hell was going on when they left the following day. It was getting really freaky by this point. That night, after they left, I slept alone in the condo again. I lay there without being able to sleep, and by 2 or 3 a.m., the stomping began. It would run all across the roof, and when it would get to the room, it would start stomping hard. So I'm really freaked out at this point, and I decided to load my handgun just in case it's some crazy homeless person or someone being crazy on the roof at 3 a.m. It kept running on the roof as I loaded the gun when, all of a sudden, the stomping stopped. And then, I hear a loud thump by the door, as if someone had jumped from the roof to the front of my door. It knocked on my door 3 times. Loud as duck. By this point I'm paralyzed in fear, but I said, "Duck it, whatever it is, it's going to get a bullet straight to the head." I walked carefully toward the door and opened it as fast as I could, but no one was there. I checked the roof and under the stairs, and there was no sign of anyone. The fear I felt ran cold through all of my body because I still felt its presence, but I just couldn't see anyone. I went back inside, locked the door, and lay in bed with my gun next to me. I was terrified and couldn't sleep all night. The next night, my wife comes home. I told her everything that had been going on, and she just couldn't believe it. She asks me how come I only heard it when she was gone and it had never happened in the past while she was there. I told her I didn't understand why it happened that weekend when she wasn't around, but it happened. I had witnesses, my sister and mom had also heard the stomping. So I'm not going crazy, and this isn't just my imagination. I'm perfectly healthy, mentally and physically, so this couldn't have been some mental disorder. We go to bed together that night, and she tells me not to worry and that I probably had smoked a little too much cannabis during the weekend. I'm a bit pissed at her because she doesn't believe me and thinks I'm being superstitious. As we are falling asleep, something pulls on my toe. A hard pull on my toe, not some light touch, it was a violent pull on my big-ass toe. I get up, wake my wife, and tell her what happened. By this point she thinks I'm having some sort of hallucination, that I should probably not smoke weed anymore, and even I started believing I was losing my mind. But as we are getting comfortable to go back to sleep, the entity violently pulls her toe as well. She gets out of bed, completely disbelieving and trembling with fear. We turned the lights on and checked to see if someone was under the bed, but there was absolutely no one. We couldn't get back to sleep that night. And a few days later, the nail on my big-ass toe turned a light shade of purple. What the duck happened? I have no ducking idea. To this day I have no ducking clue. I'm not sure exactly what time it was. But it must have been well after midnight and well before sunrise. I'd bet anything that it was at exactly 3 a.m. Because that's how these things go. I was in bed with my partner at the time, at her mom's house in the upstairs bedroom. It was just the two of us, her sister, and their mom in the house. I hadn't been there before, but she had warned me it was haunted. The setting was a 2-story farmhouse in a deep Appalachian holler. There was no ambient noise or streetlights, and no neighbors within shouting distance. It was a moonless night too, so there was hardly any light at all, except for a dim light over their barn outside. It was supposed to be a motion sensor, but it seemed to just stay on all the time. It was almost pitch black in the house, except for that slight glow from the barn. The light was not bright enough to see clearly, but it was sufficient to make out the vague outlines of the furniture in the room. I've never been able to sleep well in total darkness and silence. But my partner insisted it was the only way she could sleep, so I didn't complain. I did manage to fall asleep before midnight, rare for me. I woke back up late in the night and felt a presence in the room. I lay still for a while, hoping the feeling would go away. But it didn't, and I felt my heart start to pound. Suddenly, I decided to just sit up and look around the room. The door to the bedroom was open. I had definitely closed it before we went to bed. I stared into the black doorway for a moment and saw a young boy, standing in the open doorway. Or at least the silhouette of a boy, a slightly blacker shape contrasted against the grayish blackness of the doorway. Not quite visible at first, until I focused on it. For what felt like forever, I just stared into that doorway and tried to convince myself that the shape of the boy was just my imagination. Then, the boy walked into the room, slightly clumsy, like a little kid trying to be quiet. The steps were absolutely silent. I couldn't make out a face in the flat black shape, but it looked as if he was looking directly at us in the bed. Finally, he was standing in the middle of the room, much more visibly silhouetted against the white floral wallpaper. He had an almost formal posture, arms down at his sides, as if waiting patiently for something to happen. As I sat there in bed, staring into the shadow in the middle of the floor, the room seemed to grow even darker, and it felt as if the room itself was being drawn together. The distance between me and the boy is growing smaller. To illustrate this, imagine that freaky camera effect in Fellowship of the Ring when Frodo is staring down the road just before the Nazgul shows up, and it feels like the road itself was being pulled towards the viewer somehow. That's what it looked like from my perspective, except in a dark bedroom that was slowly growing darker. I strained my eyes to focus on the boy, afraid to lose track of him. My heart was beating so hard it hurt. I laid a hand on my partner's shoulder, but she didn't respond. I was afraid of what might happen if I made too much noise or motion. So I didn't try to jostle her. Eventually the entire room was drawn into shadow, and the boy seemed to be right up against the foot of the bed until I couldn't see anything at all, and I couldn't hear anything except my own breath and heartbeat. Then, I woke up again. There was sunlight in the window. Sweaty and out of breath, I sat up again to check the door. It was still open. I woke up my girlfriend and asked her if she'd gone out of the room already. She hadn't. Then I told her about what I saw. But she wasn't surprised. She went on to tell me about dozens of times she'd seen and heard a young boy around the house growing up. She described instances of a young boy peeking through windows, running up and down the stairs, and moving things around. A young boy was seen standing and pointing down into the basement, which apparently is where the real scary events occurred. I decided to never go down there. But I came away feeling absolutely certain that that house was haunted as duck. I actually have a few ghost stories, most of which have happened in my house. My house is about 120 years old and sits on farming land, so you can imagine there are a few. When I was about 4 years old, I used to have a reoccurring dream about a man lying dead underneath the house, not buried, just lying underneath, as our house is on stilts. 10 years later it came up in conversation that my next door neighbor found the previous owner dead just outside the back door, which is exactly the spot I dreamt about. My parents did renovations in the 90s and added a new room, which is why I dreamt he was under the house. My mom also said she used to hear old-timey music coming from the spot where he died and often cupboards open and close. He died about 2 meters away from where I sleep. Another strange occurrence happened when I was about 6 or 7 years old. In order to get from the bedroom area to the kitchen area, you have to walk through the lounge room, so anyone in the lounge room would definitely see you walk in. I was in the lounge room and saw my sister walk through to the kitchen. I remember making direct eye contact with her before I turned back to look at the TV. Not 5 minutes later she turned up with my dad in the car. She wasn't ever in the house. One quick one that may have been a dream was after my uncle died. I remembered this glowing light sitting on the edge of my bed watching me. I couldn't see his face, but do you know that feeling when you're in a dream and someone doesn't look like themselves, but you know it's them because you feel their energy? It was like that. The most frightening experience occurred at the quarantine station in Manly, Australia. We were standing in a hospital-type room, and the ghost tour guide was explaining the kind of ghost they found in that room. The entire time I was sure that someone was standing next to me, but every time I looked, they were gone. I was so sure, though, that someone was there, to the point where out of the corner of my eye I could make out facial features and their silhouette, almost like it was covered in dust. I asked the group if they saw what was next to me, and one kid said, "I wasn't going to say anything because I would rather not freak you out, but I swear I saw a woman standing next to you in a nurse's outfit." The guide mentioned that the ghost is commonly seen by people, and they often report feeling negative energy from her. That night I'm sure she followed me home because I kept feeling terrible. I couldn't sleep. It was nearly 3 a.m., and I thought to myself, if someone is here, make a noise, and just after, my door handle jingled as if someone was trying to get in. I jumped out of bed and ran to my parents' room. I'm not ashamed to say I slept in there that night. Lamau. Last one, my dad buys properties so that he can rent them out and make money off them. 2 years ago, one of them burned down with his mother, father, and son in the house. It turned out that the son ended them and himself because he was in debt for drugs or something. Anyway, we've since built a new house, and the new people have reported things happening, like pipes bursting, the house being broken into, cupboards opening, squatters, etc. I'm working the graveyard shift. After doing my round check, I sit down. My station is situated in an open plan foyer. The lounge is to the front, the lift is on my left, and the dining hall is to my right, with conjoining hallways connecting all areas, with me at the center. So I have a really good 180 view if anything happens. A few minutes have passed, the lights go off one by one as they are motion censored. Now it's dark out, but I'm occupied with mic drama. I hear the lift ding and see its doors open, but no one exits. From my seat, I can also see the flickering light inside the lift reflected in the glass wall across from me. Empty. Doors closing, I continued with my drama series. Now the lights in the hallways never go off completely, they just dim. As odd as it seems, the lights appear to brighten and then dim from one bulb to the next. Coming down the hallway towards the open area where I am, then stopping and resuming to normal. At first I thought the light bulbs may need changing, but the pattern at which they brighten and dim seems very unusual. I ignored it and continued with what I was doing. Later that night on the other side, the dining hall is dark, but in the hallway connecting to the dining hall, from my view, the light is getting bright. It brightened coming towards the dining hall, it's hard to not notice. Then it stopped. I did investigate, but everything was normal, the lights were operational, and there was nobody around. Or so I thought. Had a strange feeling for a moment that gave me goosebumps, it stopped me in my tracks. I felt as if there was something down the hallway behind me staring in my direction. Truly, I didn't want to turn around, but I did and saw a small-like thing, the height of a child, walk the corner into the connecting hallway. Curiously, there shouldn't be any kids around on the premises. I strode towards it and rounded the corner, only to discover that no one was present. Strange. I walked back to my station, turning all surrounding lights on before sitting. So I can feel assured that I'm okay. I just needed to feel like it's daytime for a bit with all the lights on. Well, that didn't last. Again the room goes dark. I'm looking down at my phone. In my peripheral vision to my right, I could sense something standing at least a few feet away from me. It feels really close to me, in the darkness, close enough that I'm starting to feel scared. My eyes turn, but my head is still facing down towards the screen of my phone, and then I hear "hi" whispered. I turned completely into its direction, and whatever it was literally disappeared down the hallway faster than I could make it out to be and faster than the light before it sensed my movement. Now I feel scared as I try to understand what happened. Something was there. It said, "Hi." But the light did not turn on until I stood up. Literally just seconds after, I'm processing everything in my mind. At the corner of my table a child's head peeks up, only revealing the top of its head and the two eyes, and just stares at me. I can still see its big eyes and lifeless skin with short, curly, dark red/brown hair. I lost my cool. I took the emergency exit stairs down and ran to the other floor, where another colleague was. I explained everything to her. She looked at me and said, "Ah, you must be new. Your first time? WTF? Now I won't go into details about what happened thereafter, but my colleagues explained that paranormal phenomena happen on these premises all the time, and it always happens with newcomers. Between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. Like it was a normal thing, like living. Never again. Scary experience years ago when I was 11 years old. When I was 11 years old in the early 1980s, I had an experience so remarkable that I remember it very often still to this day. I'm in my early 50s now. It was a Friday evening, and we had visitors, and I wanted to impress them with my pet mouse. The mouse just happened to be a small, brown variety. Sometime during the night, the mouse slipped out of my hands and escaped under the cabinets in the kitchen. I looked for a long time that evening but never caught the mouse. At some time in the evening I fell asleep on the couch in the living room. It was very common for our family to stay up late watching TV on Friday evenings, and it was very common for my mother to leave me asleep, undisturbed, on the couch. At approximately 3 or 4 in the morning, I woke up, and as I rose off the couch, I could see a small white mouse running around the kitchen floor. The living room and kitchen were joined. I was very excited, believing I was finally going to catch the mouse. Oddly though, I knew it wasn't my mouse because of the color, yet I was compelled to follow this mouse around, trying to catch it, all the while believing it was my mouse. I would get close and almost catch the mouse, but it was always a step out of reach. After several minutes of this, I realized I was now back in the living room near the front door. As the mouse got closer to the front door, I saw it swing wide open by itself, and even though I knew the mouse was incapable of opening this door, I knew it had. At this point I was determined, and so I followed the mouse out the front door, across the front of our house, and then down the side of our house. About midway to the back of the yard I became terrified, and that's when I realized I was being trapped, that something terrifying waited for me in the backyard, and the mouse was a trick. I turned around and ran back to the front door, which was still open. When I entered the door, I realized that whatever was waiting for me in the backyard was already in the house. I don't recall seeing it, I just knew it was there. My next memory is feeling myself floating in the air with light swirling all around me. Then it was morning, and I was waking from the couch, believing I had dreamed the whole thing. 30 years later my mother and I were talking, and the subject of the old house came up, and that's when she told me she saw me floating in the air one morning with bright light swirling around me. That she could see me from her bedroom down the hall and that she was terrified and couldn't move. After some time she gained courage and came to check on me. I was sound asleep, back on the couch. She thought she dreamed it too but stated she never forgot it. That's when I shared my experience. What happened? Weirdo man in a car at 3 a.m. Not sure if it was human? Okay, so a while ago, I and my 2 friends were sitting about, say, approximately 15 to 20 feet away from my front door outside. It was around 3 a.m. My neighborhood is super quiet and safe, and we would mess around at night all the time, so this didn't feel odd to do. We were sitting on the ground just chatting, and I was super focused on the conversation because it was getting deep when a small car drove weirdly fast down a street to the right of us. Now my neighborhood is a community almost, a bunch of houses with like 10 narrow streets feeding into each section, and these are all connected to each other. The speed limit is 20 kilometers per hour because why do you need to be going so fast, right? Anyways, the car is going at least 40 and drives straight past us down the main street that feeds into the neighborhood. We pay no mind to it and just carry on chatting. About 15 to 20 minutes pass when the same car emerges from a side street, to the left of us now. This is the part that needs a little bit of explanation. As I said before, the streets all feed into each other, so to loop around my house from the main street on our right to come up again to our left would take at most 30 seconds. This guy took like 20 minutes. Now, he could have just gone and explored around a bit, but anyway. This street carries on directly to the main street, and so all you have to do to leave the neighborhood is to just keep driving straight ahead. This guy pulls into the driveway of a house to our left and does it strangely quickly. Now in my mind I just thought, wow, that's weird, the neighbor's kids might have come back from clubbing or something. But the car stays in the driveway for a few seconds with its lights on and then reverses very quickly and pulls out and leaves the neighborhood. Now, as I said before, he literally had no reason to pull into that driveway to try and turn around or something. He pulled in, waited, and pulled out, going exactly the same way he was going before. After he leaves, my friend brings him up, and for some reason it suddenly just dawns on me how weird that all was. We all run into my house and lock the door. Now this is the really weird part, I didn't get a good look into the car, even though his lights were on for some reason, just because, weirdly enough, my focus wasn't on him at all. But my friend swears up and down that it was an old man judging by his hair and that he had no face. As in no eyes, no lips, no nose. I swear to God the dread I felt when my friend said that was crazy. Thinking about it now gives me this horrible feeling. I don't know if it was just a weird guy and my friend mistook his face or something. I don't know what the hell that guy was or what he was doing. Has anyone had any similar experiences? Could it just have been an optical illusion? I seriously don't believe in this stuff typically, but that felt really weird to me. 2:35 a.m. So ever since I was a small child, I've always feared this time of night. The earliest thing I can remember is waking up in the middle of the night, scared, and running across the hall to my mom and dad's room. I paused in the hall and thought I saw a green light illuminating what I believed to be a figure on the landing of the steps leading downstairs. Ever since that moment, especially at night, I had an uneasy feeling passing across the landing in that house, along with the entryway below it. I don't remember when it happened as a kid, but I think it was at 2:35 a.m. Several years later, in my 20s, I would routinely wake up at 2:35 every morning. If I was already awake, I felt extremely anxious and scared. If I woke up, I'd have a hard time falling asleep again, feeling uneasy until well past 3 o'clock. When my family got a new dog, she would always bark and run up and down the stairs at this time, and that's when my dad would take her outside. It was almost always on cue, at 2:35 a.m. One year, my parents went to South Carolina for a week, leaving my sister and me at home. The first night they were gone, I was woken in the middle of the night by the TV in their bedroom blaring with the volume up the whole way. At that moment, I assumed the dog had rolled over on the remote control, turning on the TV and blasting the volume. However, I couldn't find the remote in the sheets, so I turned it off using the button on the front of the TV. The next morning, I told my dad about what happened, and he said to me, "What time was it? 2:35? And my heart jumped into my throat since that was the first time that I'd felt such unease over the years. He told me he had woken up at that exact same time ever since moving into our house. I also found the controller next to the bed on the nightstand, meaning the dog couldn't have rolled over onto it. A few years later, we were going through the attic, and I found old drawings and stories I'd typed up on my dad's old brother typewriter. The drawings and stories were what you'd think of any 5-year-old kid's adventures. The stories were very vague, depicting a good guy versus a bad guy, but what really stood out to me among all the generic tropes was that I specified the villain attacking the hero's town at exactly 2:35 a.m. I found it very odd that I decided to be so specific about that one single thing. 2 years ago, I moved out of my parents' home and into an apartment with my girlfriend. I haven't encountered anything strange at this time since then. However, last night I heard a loud noise from our upstairs neighbor that woke me up, and when I glanced at my phone, it was 2:35 a.m., which reminded me of all these instances. I've talked to a few friends about this in the past, and the skeptics among them said there must be something that happens at that time every night to do this. We lived up on a hill, but down below there were train tracks, and the trains would run through around that time, and he thought it possible that the vibrations of the train on the tracks could have been sending that feeling to me, and possibly my dad experiencing that as well. My mom and sister never encountered the feelings, however. I wanted to share my story here. I still don't know what I saw. I really don't know how to explain this. This experience still terrifies me even 2 to 3 years later. At that time, the season was transitioning from mid-spring to summer. Sasha, my elderly dog, suffered from a weak bladder, necessitating my constant supervision to ensure her release when necessary. She would claw and whine in her cage to let us know. Sadly, she passed in 2022. It was around 3 a.m., which most believe is the witching hour. Now, I'm skeptical about ghosts and spirits. But I do believe in the afterlife. I was just a few feet away from my back porch. Meanwhile, my dog was doing her business as her routine. When I heard walking. This is a friendly neighborhood, everyone looks out for each other, and we're all acquainted. No one has ever trespassed on our property. Since we live on a hill and at a dead end, we get a lot of privacy. They had just cleared the field next to us in preparation for the construction of new houses when I saw it. I would say her, because it looked like a woman, but I couldn't tell because it was pitch black outside. I looked at my dog and then back up at the woman and said, "Hello?" It just stood there, looking at something. Maybe me. I don't know. It was silent for a while, and then it started screaming. This god-awful, gut-wrenching, blood-curdling scream. Then it began running at me at full speed. My dog wasn't heavy at all, and by then she had finished what she was doing. Immediately, I scooped her up in my arms and ran inside, shutting and locking the door behind me. I put her back in her cage and ran straight to my bedroom, hiding underneath my covers. I went out there the next morning, but nothing was there. Not even a footprint. Still, a few years later, and I don't know what that was. I've been looking for answers since then, and I thought this might be the place to go. I still can't go outside at night anymore past 1 a.m. without my sibling coming with me or carrying a weapon of some sort. I've been scared since. Please, if anyone has any answers, tell me. I need to know if I was just seeing a coyote or if this was actually some sort of creature of the night. In March 2015, I woke up at around 3 a.m. I have no idea why. Usually I wake up to drink water or use the bathroom, but I needed neither of those. Anyway, I was living in Southern California at the time near Camp Pendleton, and where I lived, there was my neighborhood and then just wilderness. There was nothing beyond my neighborhood for miles, just land. Just for your information, I have always been interested in the supernatural, but I don't think I truly believed in it until this experience. Before I went to sleep, I opened my window because it was hot, and I had my curtains open and my shades open and pulled up to make sure air was getting in. So, at 3 a.m. I woke up and just looked out my window, which was next to my bed, and I thought I saw someone standing at the crosswalk across the street. I was just thinking, that's so weird, because usually we didn't have runners or early morning walkers until about 4:45 a.m. So I got up and went to my window so I could get a closer look, and what I saw I will never forget. This thing was standing, but its legs were bent, and it had some white fur covering the body. However, I could still see some skin. Its back was hunched over, and its face looked like some sort of dog's. If this creature were standing straight up, I'd say that it would be about 7 or 8 feet tall. Now mind you, this was at 3 a.m., so I was just like, wow, okay, you're hallucinating, go back to sleep. However, I was literally paralyzed and could not take my eyes off this creature. Its nose and ears just looked so similar to a dog's or some sort of wolf or coyote. Where I lived, coyotes were very prevalent, however, they never really came into the neighborhood. And for anyone who says it could have been a bear, there are no bears in the area that I lived because it was such a warm, desert-like climate. So, as you can tell, I was just completely shocked and nervous, and as I was about to shut my window, the thing turned its head and stared right at me. It was standing directly under a streetlight, so I could see its features very clearly, and its eyes were so black, but somehow they were shining to where you could really see them staring right into your soul. That did it for me. I slammed my window shut, pulled down the blinds, closed the curtains, and jumped right into bed while pulling the covers over my face. I never went back to sleep that night. Flash forward 2 years later, in June of 2017, I again woke up, but this time I was just hungry. So I went downstairs to get some food and sat at my kitchen table. In the chair that I sat in, my back was facing the window on the side of the house. This window was about a foot off the ground, and it was open about 10 inches because my mom forgot to shut it. Now, that window had no screen because it got torn somehow, and we just didn't get around to replacing it yet. Anyway, I had my earbuds in and was watching a movie or show, I can't exactly remember, but I heard a noise. I couldn't tell if it was from the movie or from outside, so I paused it and listened. I then heard heavy breathing, but I have never heard this kind of breathing before, and it was coming from directly behind me, right outside the window. The breathing was rough and rigid and it sounded nothing like a human. I was too scared to turn around, but the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up, and I had goosebumps everywhere. The breathing lasted for about 2 minutes, then I heard heavy footsteps, as if this thing was walking away. After about 10 minutes had passed, I shut the window, locked it, closed the curtains, and ran up to my room. I told my parents about my first encounter the next day after it had happened. I was 16 at the time and still living with them. They just kind of looked at me and laughed and said I was seeing things and that it was probably just a coyote. After my second encounter, I told them the next day, and that time they really thought I was just tired and was hearing things. My question to everyone out there is, have any of you experienced something similar to this? Was this just a coyote, or do you guys think that I was hallucinating? Looking for an answer to an incident that happened to me. Before telling you the story, there is something you need to know. Where I live is a third world country, so not everything around here is very modern. We still experience irregular power outages and similar issues. Also, I am a Muslim, so I am a believer in the existence of jinns and angels. The area I lived in is an industrial area. I basically grew up here. Furthermore, the building I have lived in for so long was built around 1985 or so. And now back to the story. So the story goes back to early 2018, March or April, I don't really remember. My family wanted to visit the villages, and I wanted to stay at home. It was the night before their departure. 3 a.m. My mom went past me to use the bathroom. I decided to have a little walk on the roof. The middle point between the stairs to the rooftop is always a bit dark, as there is no light. Also, the roof had no door. It was open. I always had a weird feeling when I looked at that middle point between the stairs, although I got used to it. Anyways, when I reached the middle and turned to climb the second stairs, I don't know if I saw it correctly, but I think what I saw was a shadow. The shadow was dark, pitch black, with a few very dim neon lights in the middle, and it was hairy too, I think. It was sitting on the open rooftop door. I saw it for, 5 seconds, I think, and it just vanished. Disappeared. I stood still for another 30 seconds and then slowly climbed onto the rooftop and tried to feel anything negative around me. To my surprise, it was windy, there were black clouds, and I could hear the sound of the trees. It was very creepy. I immediately decided to go back to my room, thinking if there is something, perhaps I shouldn't disturb it. So I returned to my room. My mom went back to sleep long before my return. So I started browsing the internet on mobile. After a while, all of a sudden, my room's light went off, and the room went to pitch black. If that wasn't creepy enough, my phone's battery went to 0, and it turned off. I immediately started searching for the power brick and plugged it in to switch it on. After this I turned the light switch off and on several times, but it started behaving like a strobe light. It was blinking far too much. I decided to leave it like that and concentrated on my phone to distract myself. Suddenly I felt something come so close to me. I thought it might be the shadow I saw, who knows? I tried so hard to keep myself distracted from my surroundings. Anyways, my light instantly turned back on after the phaser azan was heard at around 5 or 6. I started to switch it on and off over and over again to check it, but it was just absolutely alright. Like nothing happened. And that's when I got scared. I literally don't have any explanation for this incident. I have never heard of similar incidents occurring to anyone else. That's why I found this creepy. I have one more intriguing real-life thing to share, but that is for another day. Also, I'm extremely curious to know if similar things happen to you or if you could shed light on this incident. Much love to you all. This area had a few deaths, and I saw a shadow person and maybe a ghost kid, same area, different times. So to give an idea, right up the street from me is a forest area, but right before it is a big fenced and electric power plant type thing with generators and those power line towers. So in the 50s a young paperboy tried to get a kite off the wire and climbed the thing and got electrocuted and died. Also, there was a suicide up there. So I and my cousin were walking my fat little beagle dog up there, and I would usually do a lap around the fenced-in area. The front is where the street led up to, and the back is where the forest is and no houses. As we approached the front after passing the far end, we encountered a cement divider designed to prevent dirt bikes from entering. My fat little dog was too big to squeeze through, so my cousin went first, and as I was trying to pick my dog up, he said, "Look at that kid. There is a little boy just staring at us from the far end with what I can only describe as an evil or emotionless expression." We both got the chills and hair up on our necks, and my dog was whimpering. My cousin almost bolted down the street, but he did not want to leave my dog. The boy had raggedy clothes, and they did not seem like clothes from the early 2000s, and I thought it was weird a little boy would be out there by himself. We knew something was weird and left. Fast forward a couple of years. I was sitting on my porch between 2 and 3 a.m., smoking a cigarette with my mom, when we saw a little boy walking up the hill with his head down towards the forest area. Mind you, there are no streetlights, so we both got freaked out and thought, why would a little kid walk up there alone and that late? We both thought it was the little kid that died. It felt like something was trying to get us to go up there, but as an older teenager, I wouldn't dare go up there alone. It was a sunny day in the summer, and we would ride dirt bikes in the forest, and at the beginning, where the fenced-in area was, there was a clearing. I would do laps in the clearing, and my sibling was with me. They decided to go home, but I wanted to ride some more. As I got to the far end, I saw at the opening a dark figure with the top hat shadow person. I instantly got a sense of fear, but I was not threatened. I was shocked at what I saw. It just stood there, and the only way out was to ride past it. I was little, but I swear it was 7 to 9 feet tall and just stood there. There was no face, but I know it was watching me. The witching hour. This all happened during my senior year of high school and the first couple years of college. I was going to a junior college, so this all took place in the same room, my bedroom. I used to be the biggest scaredy cat in the world. Scary movies would give me nightmares for weeks. I've since gotten better because my husband loves scary movies, so I'm a lot better with them. There is still one scary movie I refuse to watch, and it's The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I watched one part of that movie, and it has literally haunted me since then. It's the scene where she awakens at 3 a.m., under attack from a demon or something similar. That part of the movie stuck with me for weeks afterward. I had nightmares about that scene, and then my nightmares became somewhat of a reality. For months after that I would wake up exactly at 3 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. Never 3:01, 3:31, or 3:02, always exactly 3 a.m. or 3:30 a.m. I had an alarm clock in my room. When it first started happening, I would roll over in bed to look at my clock to see the time. After the 3 to 3:30 a.m. pattern, I stopped looking at the clock because I knew what time it would be. I was terrified. I was afraid to move, to make a sound, to do anything. Another part that really rattled me was the way I woke up. It's like my eyes would just open and I'd be wide awake. I wouldn't be able to fall asleep for another hour or so. If I could muster up the courage to get out of bed, then I'd run to my sister's room. I spent many nights before bed praying and praying for protection. It got to the point where I would sleep with the light on. I eventually did some research and found out that 3 a.m. is considered the witching hour. When you have time, you should look it up. Anyway, this did not give me any kind of comfort. After a few months of going to bed in fear, I decided to unplug my alarm clock. Whatever entity was terrifying me at night was going to have to try harder. I used the alarm on my phone and kept my phone face down because guess what? The face of my phone would light up like it got a notification at exactly 3 and 3:30 a.m. It would illuminate my whole room. At this point I was used to it. I wouldn't get scared like I used to except for every now and then. Whatever it was would still visit me, but I paid less attention to it. Then my best friend needed a place to stay for a couple of months. She stayed in my room with me. We shared a bed because that's what 19-year-old best friends do. She kept her phone on the nightstand closest to her side of the bed. At this point I hadn't told my best friend about these occurrences because they honestly sound insane. It wasn't until the light of her cell phone started illuminating at 3 and 3:30 a.m. that I talked to her about it. I told her about it, and she really was just humoring me when she would put her phone face down. Then one night she woke me up. I could hear the panic in her voice. "Alicia, it's 3 o'clock. She told me that she forgot to put her phone face down. She woke up because she thought she got a text notification because her screen lit up, but there was nothing. Only in time." Even to this day I still randomly wake up at 3 or 3:30, and it's been about 10 years since it started happening. Even after I've moved 3 times and to different time zones, it has followed me. At this point I'm not scared anymore. I imagine whatever is pestering me chuckles to itself. I feel like it doesn't want me to forget it. I keep waking up at 3:33 a.m. Female 21, keep waking up at 3:33 a.m. I'm also seeing this time constantly when I look at the clock before I get off work, 3:33 p.m. in this case, or even when I look at my phone when I'm on a phone call with someone. This happened when I was telling my dad this story earlier this morning. I looked at my phone, and we had been on it for 33:33. I'm starting to get a bit freaked out. Now back to what my title is about. 5 times within the last few months, I have woken up at 3:33 a.m. to the same noise in my house, someone yelling. I'm always waking up mid-reply, as if I'm trying to yell something back but can never remember what I'm saying in the moments following. For context, I live with 3 other people, my mom, sister, and stepdad. I am the first one to get up in the morning at 5 a.m., while they all get up around 6 to 7, so it would make no sense for it to be any of them. They are already all asleep. Like I said, this is my 5th occurrence in the last few months. I think this started in November. The first time I thought it was a coincidence, but I'm starting to believe it isn't anymore. As soon as I awoke this morning and became aware of this incident, my cat was on my chest within seconds, attempting to nuzzle beneath my blanket, then settled into a state of complete stillness. I sensed I was being watched, and I think he did too. For more context about the house itself, my room is on the 2nd floor, in a corner. I am next to the upstairs bathroom, whose door is normally open, allowing the mirror to create a portal or vortex with the mirror in my mom's room, right across the hall. I'm aware of this and try to close the bathroom door when I can, especially at night. But when I wake up, it's always open. Advice? My grandpa is a medium, and I'm talking to him tonight, but I am terrified. Update: I talked to my grandpa last night via phone call, since he lives states away. The first thing he asked me was, "Are you wearing your crystal I gave you?" To his surprise, my answer was no. Honestly, I was never a big believer in crystals to begin with, but my mind might be changing my opinion slightly. He said that he would tune in and see what he could discover and ask those he communicates with spiritually. He personally found nothing to be too concerned about. He is, though, in communication with my great-grandpa, who passed away way before I was born, and he said that he would check in on me last night. I was a little skeptical, I'm not gonna lie. That was until I was talking to my dad after the phone call. We were sitting in the living room, just him and I, while my sister and stepmom were in another room. This is my dad's house, not the house I'm currently living in, and from behind my dad I swore I saw movement in the sunroom. My dad is also very in tune with things that happen around him, and he smiled and said, "Someone is in the sunroom, isn't there? You see them?" It wasn't so much seeing as feeling, so my dad and I got up to go to the sunroom, and upon approaching the doorway, a cold chill blew past us, and both my dad's arm hair and mine stood straight up. I wish I was lying, because I hated that feeling. My dad walked in and asked me to describe what I was feeling. I sensed a male that I have never met, and he was tall. Tall enough to have possibly hit his head on the door to the sunroom. My dad laughed and said it was probably Great-Grandpa D, just like my grandpa has said he'd come check on me. He was 6 feet 2 inches. I didn't feel unwelcome in the space, but I didn't step foot inside of it because whoever, was in there was unfamiliar, yet warm in a way that I can't describe. I just turned my back to the room and walked away. I felt eyes on me, but I put on my shoes and said bye to my dad. This whole encounter had me very freaked out, and I feel like I've opened a part of my brain that I'm not quite sure I want opened, but I believe it's too late. Fishing story. I'm new to this place and would like to share an experience that I still find difficult to articulate. I often think about this experience, and I wonder if someone else has had a similar encounter. I was out fishing one night last summer at a reservoir that's had its fair share of events. A small skirmish in the Civil War, people driving their cars off the bridge, etc. It was 2 or 3 a.m., and I was alone. I had been there fishing for maybe an hour or so and wasn't having much luck. Still, by this time there was nobody around. It's 3 a.m. anyways. I happened to be reeling in one of my rods and had my body somewhat turned towards a pretty steep hill and a fairly thick tree line behind me. Out of the corner of my eye I saw a bright orb-shaped light that appeared to be coming down this steep hill that I mentioned. At first I started to clear my throat and make noise to try and tell whoever this was that I was there. But the light didn't come towards me, it moved in a very straight pattern down the hillside at an angle and off into the tree line. Mind you, this was not a person with a flashlight, and I said that for 2 reasons. 1. The light did not bounce as if it were being carried by a person walking. It was very still, straight, and methodical about where it was headed. 2. There were no sounds of crunching leaves or breaking sticks, it was completely silent. I could have heard a cricket fart out there, it was so quiet, I didn't hear a sound. The kicker for me is that after I saw this light disappear into the trees, I had what I can only describe as flight syndrome, lol. I had the most intense chill come over my body, my hair stood up on my arms, and I knew it was time to go. I reeled in my line the rest of the way, grabbed my stuff, and took off out of there. I haven't been back since. I don't know what that was, but I know it wasn't a person walking, it wasn't a car or bike, and it wasn't a firefly. Something stole my husband's voice, advice needed. Growing up, my mom was always into ghost shows and hunts and things like that. She is a true believer, she claimed to always have a sensitivity to other forces. Many encounters happened in my childhood home. She had more than a few visits from a little boy, he was just a playful spirit, how you would expect a child to act. On the other end of that, she has had a few encounters with evil entities and experienced sleep paralysis. She is a tough woman to scare, but this did the trick. I began to experience small things myself. There have been instances where I've heard my name being called when no one was home, experienced a strong urge to act or refrain from acting, or caught glimpses of things that caught my attention. I have experienced vivid dreams that occasionally provide warnings or feelings about a person or situation. My encounter last night has left me drained and worried. I have smudged and blessed my house and myself, voicing that all bad and evil things need to leave, for they are not welcome. I need more answers. This happened around 3 a.m. Yes, I know that is the witching hour and the significance of it. This is another reason why I am so bothered. I truly believe this was more than just a bad dream, as I do not recall waking up after it ended. It begins with me waking up because I hear my husband calling my name from our bonus room, asking me to come out there, he needs my help urgently. I am lying in bed on my right side with the hall and door being at my back down near my feet. My husband normally sleeps on the side that I am currently facing with our dogs in between us. I sleep with my head covered and under a pile of blankets and pillows. In my half-awake state I plan to go out there and see what he needs. As I touch the blanket on my face, I get the overwhelming feeling to stop. I freeze, my husband calls for me again, no response. He calls for me a 3rd time, he is getting frustrated and urging me to come out there right now. I have not acknowledged him at all yet. I keep listening to him call for me, different variations of asking me to come out there to help him. My intuition is screaming at me to ignore it. He continues to yell and gets louder, he is angry at this point. This is when a thought pops into my head, my husband is in bed asleep in his normal spot with the dogs in the middle of us. That's not him, the terror hits. I remember now, I got ready for bed and woke him up. He was snoozing on the couch in the bonus room. I turned the TV off, and both of us headed to our room. The pups join us and sleep nestled between us. Returning to the present, my husband continues to call for me, and it sounds as if he is walking down the hall towards our room. The more I ignore him, the angrier he gets. The voice begins to change, it takes on a deeper tone with growls, it sounds like a bunch of voices in one, and it gives me chills. It's yelling so loud I cannot hear anything else. My mind is just filled with the yelling/growling of this voice telling me to turn over and come out there. I try to start praying in my head, and the voice begins to mock me. I could not form physical words, I have trouble getting my mind in order to even form the words in my head. I persist and begin to pray on repeat. By now the entity is at my back, down by my feet near the door to our bedroom. I can feel it, it wanted me to turn over to face it and acknowledge it. This seems to go on forever, with it screaming/growling at me to face it and me praying as loud and as hard as I can in my head. I am completely frozen. It was probably a matter of minutes at most, and then out of nowhere it all stopped. The thing is gone, I am terrified but filled with relief. It seems to be over. I feel exhausted and drained. I find the courage to look around my room, everything looks normal. My issue with all of this is that I do not remember waking up after it ended, I only remember waking up when I heard my not husband's voice calling me in the beginning. I kept praying and fell back asleep until my alarm went off. I woke up physically and mentally drained, and my emotions are all over the place. I feel on edge and so off. This is unlike anything I have ever experienced. I love scary movies and do not spook easily. I am not afraid of the dark and am calm and collected in high stress or bad situations. I consider myself brave yet cautious since I listen to my intuition. I would be the person in a scary movie that realizes something is going on and takes steps to survive. I have had nightmares before, and this feels different. In every nightmare I have experienced, I distinctly recall awakening. It is always evident that it was a dream. This felt so real. My bed was the same, my blankets were the same, and my dogs were in the same spot after the encounter that they were in during it. There is nothing that I can recall that points to it being a dream. I wonder what the entity was that I encountered. What can I do to better protect myself and my husband? Why did it mimic his voice? I am truly scared. I think I was supposed to die this morning. So, this just happened to me today. To give some context to this story, I wake up at 3 a.m. and have a 30-minute drive to arrive at work. I usually try to leave my house around 3:30 a.m. so I can arrive at 4 a.m. I also want to add in that I am not super religious and rarely ever pray, however, I do believe in God. I woke up this morning at my usual time, 3 a.m. The first few minutes of me waking up felt normal. I looked through the crack of my curtains, where I could see the lamppost light hitting my neighbor's house. I don't know why, but after I looked out, I just started feeling this horrible sensation of impending doom. It was very strange to me. I have been waking up at 3 a.m. for almost 3 years and have never had any sensations of fear upon me. I try to shake off this feeling and proceed to go to the restroom and get ready for work, but as soon as I re-enter my room, this overwhelming sensation comes back. My mind was just telling me, something doesn't feel right about today. I feel like something is going to happen to me or someone close to me. I finish up getting ready, and before I leave my house, I do the sign of the cross, grab my keys, and head out the door. I walk towards my car and hear all the nature sounds, like bugs and whatever is up at that time making noise. I turned on my car, and I realized I forgot something in the house. I took off my house key from my car keys and left my car on and headed inside real quick. As soon as I stepped out of my house that last time, it was complete silence outside, and my car was the only thing I could hear. I found it strange, but I shook it off, thinking I was being paranoid. I start driving, and all is fine. I'm driving listening to music, and I start getting closer to an intersection. From a distance I see a semi pulling up to the intersection, and I get closer. My gut feeling tells me to start slowing down even though I am on the highway and have the right of way. I was going a speed of 70 miles per hour to 80 miles per hour. I see the truck pull up to the stop, and as I'm getting closer and slowing down a bit more, the truck almost crosses the road until they notice my car driving closer to the intersection. My mind keeps racing and wondering. What if I had left a minute sooner? What if I wouldn't have forgotten something inside my house? What if I wouldn't have done that quick sign of the cross before leaving my house? Would I have been in an accident? Would I have died this morning? I also want to let anyone who listens to this know if this would have happened. I would have been hit on the driver's side of the vehicle. I also want to say sorry for rambling, I just want the story to be visualized from my perspective. I also apologize if there are any grammatical errors. Shadow person in my closet. My boyfriend and I recently, in March, moved to a new town. My boyfriend had the luck to be able to transition into his new job very quickly, not so much for me. There was a period of 2 to 3 weeks where I was staying alone in our old apartment due to this. The first few nights alone were fine. I would browse the internet or engage in video games while consuming alcohol until I became intoxicated and eventually passed out to sleep. One particular night, I was stone cold sober when I went to sleep. I remember being awake. I am a light sleeper and not a toss and turn type sleeper, so if I have to reposition myself, I am always awake and aware of such things. It was early morning, between 2 and 3 a.m. I woke up feeling uncomfortable, not a feeling in the room, more like I am particular about which side I sleep on, etc., so I rolled over to the now empty space, which would have been occupied by my sleeping boyfriend if he were not already living in our new apartment, 3.5 hours away from me. His side of the bed in that apartment was closest to the closet. Just as I got comfortable on my left side, a shadow person slowly eased itself from the closet, approaching me. It had no features, no hair, nothing standing out from its outline, slowly and curiously approaching from the opposite end of the closet, 5 feet away from me. At that time, it did not occur to me it was a legit shadow person. My first instinct was that it was a person and was about to do terrible things to me. I instantly rolled to the other side of the bed, jumped out, turned on the light, and quickly grabbed my .40 that was on my usual side of the bed, prepared to defend myself from an intruder. Nothing. I searched the closet, under the bed, anywhere a person would have been. Nothing. I talked to my boyfriend shortly after the experience, and he told me he had also seen a shadowy figure in the closet when he was home alone but wisely never shared that with me. After that incident, I would hear something rustling around in the bedroom while I was getting ready for work in the hallway, with the bedroom door closed. No fans were on in the room, no drafts, and my 2 cats were in the kitchen, probably knocking over cups and trying to eat stolen hair ties. Since I never got negative vibes or any vibes at all the whole time we lived there, I chalked it up to the shadow person getting attached to my boyfriend and me and maybe being sad we were leaving. I had an unusual encounter at 3 a.m. A few nights ago I went to bed in my basement at 3 a.m. Yes, I know it sounds very typical. Leading up to this, it was a normal night. I was up late working and I watched Batman, the animated series, to settle before bed. Then I woke up with a feeling of absolute dread, so intense it woke me out of my sleep. I felt like there was a predator nearby. There was a silence like when you're in the woods and all the bugs, animals, and crickets all of a sudden fall quiet. I thought to myself, there is something here, and I could feel a malevolent presence and felt eyes observing me. The only time I've had this feeling was when I was a child. When I'd be in a bad dream, I could sense something was wrong and be waiting to be attacked. I'd describe it as a very primal feeling, like your hairs are standing up. So I lay there in a freeze, waiting for something to happen, then trying not to think about it so nothing happened. It felt like the more I paid attention to the bad feeling, tension was building. I could almost hear a noise get louder the more I paid attention to the fear in the air. But when I stopped thinking about it, it went away. This happened for a bit, tension building to a peak, then releasing. I felt like if I continued to focus on the presence, something would happen. A bunch of other things were happening during this time too. I was very tired, in and out of sleep, but I remember talking to someone/something, voices, not loud, and closed eye imagery. I turned to the other side of the bed to try to sleep again, was very tired and could barely think. Then had some dreams, that I forget, but they were very hectic and chaotic. Something I can recall from my dream is I saw my sleeping face in third person. I remember something rushing at me fast, rushing at my face. Like a force or an energy. Something got close to me in the dream, I got spooked and shouted/screamed. A quick scream, like when you get spooked by something that came out of nowhere. As this was happening, I saw myself in third person, but this time my back was springing up out of bed. Still lying but being held up by my hands, so I was sort of in a cobra yoga position. I woke after this, but there was a delay before I fully woke up. How I would describe it as a feeling like I was coming up from multiple levels like an elevator. It was only a split second but was noticeable to me. Then I sprang up fast out of my sleep in the same position I saw in my dream. I was there in the bed frozen, feeling something dark happening. I lay in the dark trying to find my flashlight or phone fast so I could light the room to feel safe. Eventually, I got up to turn on the light, and there is only one light switch in my basement. So I had to walk across the basement while feeling like something was going to take my back. I was staying calm, though, because I know that some beings like when you are afraid. When the light was on, there was still silence filled with tension. I checked my phone and it was only 4 a.m. I thought this had been happening for hours, but all of it was only within an hour. I went upstairs to my bed to sleep with a show on and the blinds open to get light from the lampposts. I woke up very late the next day, at 1 p.m. I was feeling drained and my body and legs felt heavy, like I had run 50k. Felt as if my essence was drained and had to do things to get my energy back up. The more I think about it, the more details pop up. Have you ever had an experience like this, or has something similar happened to someone you know? Feel free to ask questions. Creepy old house off the Pony Express Trail. All of these events occurred during the year and a half that I lived in this house. A little backstory. So I had just graduated high school and was getting ready to go off to college a few towns over. I decided to move in with my boyfriend, who lived closer to the campus I was going to. This house was out there. It wasn't necessarily rural, but it was a very small hick town. The house was located just off the main road, which in the 1800s was known as the Pony Express Trail. Still called that today. So I move in. Everything's fine for the first few months. Nothing too crazy. Some bumps in the night, but I never thought too much of it. My boyfriend's sister and I are pretty close, and occasionally I'd go into her room, on the second floor right above our room, and smoke and hang out with her. Well, one night, about 4 months after I moved in, it's just me and her hanging out upstairs. We were listening to music and just talking when I heard a knock on what I thought was her bedroom door. We both said, "Come in," and no one answered. The door didn't move. So we turned down the music in case they didn't hear, and that's when we noticed the doorknob rattling. Aggressively. And we're both thinking it's my BF trying to scare us. So we're like, "Duck off. Stop messing with us." And it stopped. So I got up kind of irritated and flung the door open. No one there. Go downstairs. No one's home. It was just us. We were both pretty scared, so we got in my car and went to the grocery store, the only one in those neck of the woods, until her parents or my boyfriend got home. We didn't talk about it too much. It was just one of those weird things we tried not to make too much of. So days go by. I start waking up. Every night at 3 a.m., hearing what sounds like footsteps coming down the stairs. It's a pretty small house. The stairs were right outside of our door, so I just figured maybe it was his dad getting some water. But it was like pacing. It sounded like someone would walk down the stairs, pace in front of our door, then go back up the stairs and pace the hallway. So after about 2 weeks of this happening every night, me seeming to be the only one noticing it, I wake up at 2:45 a.m. I think to myself, that's odd, usually I wake up at 3. So I'm trying to fall back to sleep, and then I started to hear something like a bed shaking upstairs? Like a metal frame? And muffled cries? I start to hear it slam into the wall, and this wakes my BF up. We're both like, what the duck is going on? I thought maybe his sister's ex had come over and was either doing the deed or hurting her. So I told my BF to go check on her. He opens the door to our room, and I hear our dogs in his parents' room upstairs whining. He goes upstairs. I hear him open the door. Then I hear him bolt down the stairs and run into our room. I ask him what happened, and he's like, nothing. Nothing was out of place. Sister was fast asleep. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said she didn't hear anything. Weird. Okay, fast forward, his sister says she wants to switch rooms. So we're like, sure. Bigger room? Hell yes. So we move into this upstairs room. Technically the master. It was a huge room. But it was really long and narrow. And it had 6 closets. Like tiny little rooms. I had stopped waking up as much in the middle of the night by this time, and I was really excited to start decorating our room. 2 of the 6 closets were side by side. We decided this would be a great place to have an indoor grow. Just knock the wall out between them. We start renovating this closet. We're able to tear the wall down in a day. I'm exhausted, so I lie down and fall asleep early. I thought I had only been asleep for a few minutes when I suddenly jolted awake with an immense feeling of dread. I looked at my phone. Exactly 3 a.m. I roll over and grab onto my boyfriend and pull the blanket over my head. I can't explain it. I just felt terrified. This starts happening every night. Eventually my BF asks what's up. And I tell him about how I keep waking up. I feel heavy and terrified for what seems like no reason. He tells me it's been happening to him too. But he didn't want me to think he was scared. At the same time I start to notice little things changing. At first it would be something small. Like, I know I just turned out the light when I left our room, but I'd come back from the bathroom and it would be on. Or the TV would power on randomly. The fridge door would be open after no one was in there. Then bigger things started changing. I'd been so terrified I started burning sage and keeping a Bible and crucifix by my bed. My sage bundles would mysteriously disappear. I asked everyone in the house. No one owned up to it. So I started stashing it in a box tucked away in the closet. The next day I go to use it. It's gone. So the waking up is still happening. It starts getting worse once I bring in religious artifacts. The doorknob starts shaking again. I start hearing tapping coming from inside the closet we just renovated. I'm ducking terrified 24/7. So I decide to put a cross over every door in the room. Bad ducking idea. Days after doing so, the scariest event I've ever experienced in this house happened. So I'm home alone. My BF is at the store. I'm reading in bed when I hear the doorknob turn. I thought it was my BF, maybe he forgot something? The door opened so slowly. Like in a horror movie, I screeched while doing so, "Old house. I'm frozen. I can't ducking move." It's probably only been 3 seconds, but it feels like a lifetime when the door slams shut. As it slams, the cross above the main door goes flying. It doesn't fall to the ground. It ducking flew through the air and landed on the other side of the room. Then the cross above the 2 other closet doors, where I felt there was the most activity, dropped to the ground. It happened after the door was already slammed shut. I was crying. I could barely get up to try and run. But somehow I managed. I bolted out of the door and stood out front until my BF got home. This was the day I moved out. I'm not even kidding. I literally packed all my belongings into my car and drove away. It caused a lot of strain on my relationship. But we were able to make things work. 5 years later, and we're still together. This time in a much less haunted house. Wednesday, 3 a.m., Virginia. Wednesday, 17/2021, 3 a.m., going into Thursday morning. Yes, it's Thursday. I was at a park with my girlfriend around 3 a.m. in Virginia. She lives in Virginia, so I'm there all the time. So Wednesday we were together at a park called Deer Lick Park in Springfield, Virginia. No one was around. We are into doing anything, contacting the other side, or anything like that. We stay much to our own. We have gone to this park all the time and have never had a problem or encountered anything. But this night, we heard a voice. Clear as day. Like it was in the back seat of my car. No one was around but us. She heard exactly what I heard. We described it the exact way. It was like a generic pre-recorded doll voice. You can hear it like it was one of those dolls where you press the stomach and they talk. The same crackling noise as a recording. But we heard it clear as day, loud enough like it was in the car with us. All it said was hi, and that was enough to scare us to leave. I have never seen my girlfriend ever react like that. I could see the terror in her face. She didn't want to stay in the car because she thought that it was still inside the car. The face of terror, like she said, a ghost or something worse. But we both didn't see anything. Nothing. But we heard it so clearly. It happened so recently, so we are still with fear. I try not to think about it. But she cannot. I can't explain to her what happened. I am a person of logic, so I ran so many scenarios in my head. But I can't even explain it to myself. I looked around to see if anyone was near us, and I saw nothing. We will never go back there. Never. It was life-changing. I don't know anything about that park. I tried to research everything I could about that park and couldn't find anything about it. Any information would be greatly appreciated. Children laughing in the middle of the night. I am confused and unsure if this is anything paranormal. I reside in a populated city, downtown MIA, in an apartment building. I live on a low floor, from which you can hear people talking normally from outside. For the past month, I have been getting woken up at 2 to 3 a.m. by the sound of children laughing and playing outside. In the beginning I was confused because who lets their children play in the middle of the night on a weekday? The past 2 times that I heard them, I woke up, and I peeked out the window to see if they were there, and I didn't see anyone. The city is empty and alone during these times. They also stop laughing as soon as I peek out the window. In the beginning I thought I was dreaming, but I confirmed what I was hearing while fully awake. My partner has heard them too, but only once. I've told my mother, and she thinks it's ghosts or something non-human. I have heard children playing during the middle of the day too, but when I peeked out the window, there were actually 3 children playing in the small grass field downstairs. I don't really feel fear from this, more like frustration because it disrupts my sleep lol. Please let me know if anyone has any idea or opinions of what this could be or if it's actually children playing during these times. Thank you. The experience set me down my current spiritual path. This happened about 6 years ago. I was a freshman in high school. Yes, I'm a fairly young guy. I was going through a very hard time in my life. Looking back, compared to other things I have gone through, this was nothing. I was having average high school boy issues. Girls. Work. Parents. You know. All that. My at the time girlfriend cheated on me and became pregnant. My boss at work, on this particular day, tricked me into burning my arm. Long story, and my family didn't really understand. So that night, after all this came to its apex, I lost it. I lay in bed as a miserable wreck that night. I was angry at the Christian God and just everything. So I called out. I prayed aloud to nobody in particular. Just an if anyone can hear me sort of thing. Someone heard me. It was around 3 a.m. when things got weird. I was finally calm enough to sleep. I was drifting off when a voice spoke. I cannot tell if it was from outside of me or in my head. But it rattled me. It said, "Just keep it quiet," in a deep, soothing tone. I believe it meant for me to shut up and stop whining about my shitty, but not too shitty, life. I was, of course, horrified. I leapt out of bed and ran to the bathroom. I turned the lights on and just stood there. I half expected to see Bloody Mary, or Jason, or something awful in the mirror. Nothing scary happened. I was calm. I felt comforted. But I didn't want to go back to my room, so I went to the living room and lay on the couch. About 15 minutes later, the room became extremely hot. I felt hot gusts of wind. I assumed it was our heater, it was summer. But I didn't believe in any ghosts at the time. Then things got weirder. I could hear static electricity all around me. Faint, but still there. Then I started feeling staticky, or electrified. I was, in my mind, being electrocuted. Then I felt pressure, a hand, on my chest. It was touching my skin. Not my shirt. It was somehow in between me and my clothing. Then I passed out. The next day, I awoke to the sounds of my phone back in my bedroom. It was a friend, texting me. She had nearly the exact same experience as me. And after that day, we became very close friends, but only for a little while. 3 a.m. the devil's hour? Lately, for the past few months, I've been having issues sleeping. I keep waking up around the time of 3 to 4 a.m. It doesn't matter how tired I am because I just end up falling back asleep right after. On top of this, I constantly wake up with cold sweats, and I have a history of documenting my dreams, so I have a really good memory of what I dream about, and when I get cold sweats, it's not because of a nightmare. Just recently I went on vacation for 2 weeks, and surprisingly my sleep was normal. I could sleep 6 to 9 hours straight without waking up once, and the cold sweats were gone. I didn't think too much about this until I got home, and again, I woke up at 3 to 4 a.m. with a cold sweat. I've always been superstitious and curious about hauntings and demons. I actually tried many times to contact them in the past with a Ouija board when I was 15 or 16. This sounds really stupid, but I even cut myself and put my blood on it. My mom made me throw the Ouija board away, but I kept the bloody planchette, and it's been in my room with me ever since. But nothing really crazy happens. Or crazy enough to make me believe that demons or supernatural entities even exist. I also made the conclusion that if they do exist, they can't really do shit to me if nothing's happened after all I've done. Anyways, just for fun, I decided to record myself sleeping. So far, it's been 3 nights that I've done this, and the results are curious. I do some pretty weird shit in my sleep apparently. Like moving around into every possible position, scratching my nose, raising my arm in the air, and smacking my lips. Yeah, I know, WTF? And I'm just waiting for more weird stuff as I continue this journey. Although those things are entertaining, what concerns me is what happens at 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. during the recording session. The screen goes completely black, and no, it's not because I moved in front of the camera or anything. The second night of recording, the screen was black starting at 3 a.m., but the color returned at 4 a.m. until I woke up. The third night, last night, was really weird because it completely stopped recording right before 3 a.m., and I woke up at exactly 3:59 a.m., which was when I checked my iPad. It recorded for exactly 3:42 and 42 seconds, and the recording started at 11:05 p.m., which is freaking weird because I've only used 31.8 gigabytes out of 128 gigabytes of data, so I have no idea why it would just stop recording like that. Also, on the first night I recorded for almost 5 hours, and it didn't stop recording until I manually stopped it. So this has made me really curious, and I'm curious what anyone else has to say about this. Camping trip, 2014. This scenario happened to me and my girlfriend I was dating back in the summer of 2014. This all took place in South Carolina, and my girlfriend and I wanted to take a camping trip. We initially tried to go to a place 45 miles from our hometown, but they were going to charge us double what we thought we were going to pay for. We decided to head back, and it just occurred to me there's a spot very close to where we live. Now I will say it's more boondocking and off-grid. We didn't have to pay for anything, we just parked the car and got out. This place is quite gorgeous. There's a historic bridge and trail, and also some of the oldest railroad tracks in the South. We got there before sunset, so we had plenty of time to pitch the tent and set everything up. There were a few cars when we arrived, but they were most likely hikers and would be gone by nightfall. The only thing that made us uncomfortable was a busted up and rusted old white van with no license plate. We both pointed that out, thinking it was weird, but we shrugged it off and started walking to a good place to set camp up. After several hours, around 3 a.m., following some quality time spent with her and taking in all the nature and then going to sleep, we started to hear this obscure singing and walking around our tent. Anytime you hear commotion that early in the morning, nothing good can happen out of it. I peered my head out the tent to see what was going on. I didn't see anything or anyone, but nonetheless I didn't want to stay in that area when we both were freaked out. Just because I couldn't see it doesn't mean it's not there. I barely did a decent walk around our tent. As we were quietly gathering our belongings, we swore we heard the singing get louder. I recall words in this song he was singing had "Now won't you all come out?" followed by this raspy laughing. Once we finally packed the tent, that was when we heard the crunching on the leaves and his humming, so we knew this guy was close by. We booked it. I grabbed her hand and threw the tent and folding chairs on my back. We made sure to run the opposite way from where all his noise was coming from. Luckily we set camp up fairly close to the parking lot because I could see lights through the trees. As we ran and scurried away from whoever was chasing us, we noticed the lights from the parking lot weren't just the street lights, but also, to our horror, that old rusty white van we saw at the beginning. We hurried uphill just hoping this guy was alone. His van was right in front of mine. If he had an accomplice, that would be another person to deal with. As we reached the lot and got into the bright streetlights, I noticed my girlfriend's hand make a slight twitch, and her pace slowed down. From that, I could tell she was turning her head to take a look at our attacker. I heard her gasp loudly. "Come on, don't look, we're almost there." She focused back, and we continued running in unison. This guy was getting closer, as I could hear the noise of the gravel intensify. I heard his wheezing and him barking, "Don't y'all think you'll get away?" As we just made it past the van, we split, and I handed her the keys so she could unlock/start the car, and I could throw all the gear in the trunk, and we could make it out of this place. As I frantically laid the camping gear in the backseat and headed to the driver's side, that was when my body faced forward for the first time in a while. Every noise this guy was making was close and amplified now. With the car running, I kept my head down to put it in reverse, but curiosity got the better of me. In the brightness of my headlights, this man was a behemoth with a stern, wrinkled face with patchy red hair. He had a goatee that was smeared with dirt and crud. His eyes were fixated on us like a scope magnifying two 10-point bucks. He was wanting to kill. "Get back here!" he barked, waving a baseball bat back and forth. I shook my head, and with it I swerved out, and we were on the way out with our hearts racing. In the rearview mirror we saw the man slam the bat in frustration. A narrow escape, we drove to Waffle House and spent the rest of the early morning until the sunrise. Heard footsteps walking around at 3 a.m. Last week I was visiting family in Nicaragua. I was staying with them in a guest house/room with my dad. The room has its own bathroom, and my cousins set up a divider and made my bed and my dad's their own little private room area covered by curtains. My father had the habit of awakening very early each morning and creating considerable noise while walking to the bathroom. However, the night before our flight back home I was awakened by the sound of footsteps walking around. My initial thought was, there he goes up so early. I expected the light to be turned on, but they never did and kept pacing around. My second thought was, why is my dad just walking around with no flashlights and won't turn the lights on? I grabbed my phone that was on my bed and checked the time. It was 3:02 a.m. At that moment I realized it wasn't my dad, and I lay frozen in bed. By 3:20 I heard some sound coming from my dad's side of the room, and I saw a flashlight. I asked him if he was up, and he said yes, and then he got up to go to the bathroom. As he walked to the bathroom, his footsteps sounded lighter than what I previously heard. The footsteps sounded heavy and fast-paced. I told my dad about what happened, and he believed me, and so did my cousins and family members. They said they've also heard strange noises coming from that room, usually when it's empty. I had never been scared, but that night put doubts in my mind. 3 a.m. is the devil's hour. So this is a story that happened a couple of years ago when I went back to my homeland of Malaysia on holiday. It started when I went to visit my cousin and his mom for 2 nights. So at the time, my cousin was living with his mom, and they lived in a fairly big house. The day I arrived at his place, he told me about an experience he had 2 nights ago. He was chilling in his room when he suddenly heard the handle on his door turning. He looked at the door, and for about 5 minutes, the handle just kept turning as if someone was trying to open it. He never keeps his door locked, so it was strange that it never actually opened. He called out his mum's name a few times, but she was asleep. It was 3:13 a.m. when he looked at the clock. Apparently 3 a.m. is supposed to be the devil's hour. The next day he was visiting his aunt and told her the story. She gave him a weird look and asked him what time this happened. She then told him that around 3:10 a.m. the same night she heard someone knocking on her bedroom window. The knocking went on for roughly 10 minutes, and then it just stopped. Fast forward to the first night I spent at his place. We were just relaxing in his room while talking. He was sitting on his bed, and I was sitting up against his bedroom door. Suddenly, we both heard 3 quick, loud knocks on the door, and his door handle started turning. I looked at the door expecting his mum to walk in. It was pretty late, and we were being kind of loud. But nothing happened. We both looked at each other and instantly knew we needed to check the time. It was 3:05 a.m. We sat for a while, waiting to see if anything else would happen to the door. Nothing happened. After a few minutes we both settled down and went back to chatting. All of a sudden, we heard a crash coming downstairs from the kitchen. It sounded like a bunch of pots and pans had fallen on the ground. This happened at 3:12 a.m. We immediately ran out of the room to his mum's room to check on her. She was fast asleep. After mustering up some courage, we were both freaking out. We decided to go downstairs together to investigate. It was really creepy because it was pitch black downstairs, as all the lights were off. It seemed like the longest walk of my life when it only took us 20 seconds to walk over to the kitchen. We turned on the lights, and scattered across the floors were a bunch of pots and pans that were stored in a closed cupboard. We cleaned everything up and went back upstairs. The next day, we told his mom about everything that happened. His mom, being a big believer in the paranormal, told us that the events were no coincidence, as 3 a.m. was the ghost hour. I'll leave it up to you to decide if we had a genuine paranormal experience or we were just imagining stuff, but this would have to be the second scariest experience I've had. Walked in on something bizarre during a full moon ritual and got tailed, not sure what to make of it. So I am a practicing magician. Let's say I was planning on summoning a particular demon, no biggie, nothing out of the ordinary in my line of work, so to say. I tend to perceive more than usual, I was born like this. I'm used to ghosts, the whole lot, not much shakes me. Anyway, I live next to a large forest area where a big battle had been fought in World War II, a beautiful but very eerie swampy spot. Have seen wraiths and stuff, strange happenings all round, I see it as a playground. But this one night I got freaked to the core. The day before the ritual, I went out to scout a location for it. It's quite a big reserve, and I haven't gone that deep that often. I found a beautiful arched bridge leading onto a small grassy island with some cows, surrounded by water. Noted the exact spot and went home. At 3 a.m. the next morning, I went out for my hike, prepped, full moon in Scorpio. The air felt strange, and all the birds were screaming and gawking, and it started to frighten me, this gut feeling of go back, go back, go back. But I had done rituals like these before, and there's usually a sense like this, so I just pushed on. It got worse and worse, and I felt more freaked out and pushed on. Suddenly as I got near the bridge, all went dead silent, the birds stopped. I had been doing my practice to get into a premeditative trance during the walk and have -3 eyesight, so most of my vision is just black. And slowly a bright red dot flashing appeared in my vision. It was straight ahead, exactly where I intended to perform my ritual. I honestly, for some reason, didn't blink twice and kept walking when I noticed it slowly blinking, and I noticed a big red fire appear out of nowhere, like a flamethrower but vertical. Maybe I heard some muffled voice-like sounds, I'm not sure. So I stopped and looked at it, and it just kept flashing. For a second, I felt like something was testing me, and also, morbid curiosity got me pushing forward, and another fire appeared out of nowhere. As soon as I started walking, the fire stopped and the red light sped up. I suddenly felt as if something had triggered a deep-seated subconscious response, and I experienced an overwhelming sense of hopeless fear, unlike anything I had ever felt before. I don't know if this is relevant, but I have previously experienced attempts on my life, and I felt more frightened this time. I cannot explain this level of fear. I slowly turned around and just walked away, too afraid to bolt. I felt watched. As soon as I waddled far enough, I started trying to call friends for comfort, they didn't pick up. Even my other weird friend who always stays up at night went straight to voicemail, this'll get fascinating later. At the end of the road, I got out of the forest path, and there was an expensive car there that drove off across the bridge I had to cross. After crossing the bridge, the same car was waiting on the other side and slowly drove off. I live at a T-crossing, and as I crossed the road home, the same car came out of a corner slowly, saw me walk away, and sped off. I was thoroughly freaked out for the next couple of hours. At about 5 a.m. I got called back by my friend. He was awake the entire time, and his phone sound was on, and he had connection, though my call went straight to voicemail. It turns out that he received the notification about my call just then and called me back immediately. When I told him what happened, he double-checked, and the missed call was indeed at 3:30. But he got the notification around 5. Strange. So morbid curiosity sent me back the next morning, and I found what seemed to be many trodden footpaths in the grass I hadn't noticed earlier leading in random directions, with no footsteps or anything recognizable. They all led to one ovalish shaped patch of grass right in the middle that wasn't necessarily flattened. The flowers were fine, but it seemed to have grown slower than the grass around it. Weird. And the cows I had seen the day before were nowhere in sight. I haven't seen them since on walks either, but it's a large spot and the animals move around, so what do I know? I suspect that either a UFO or a secret group is conducting a ritual at the same location. Either way, why was I tailed? Why was I drawn to the place? What the duck did I walk in on? Why was I so scared? Should I have just kept going? Should I go back at the same time on a full moon? I want to know so badly. I lived in a haunted house for 13 years, but it still finds me in my dreams. Some houses never let you go. For 13 years, my family and I lived in a house that always felt off. Something was wrong with it. We all felt it. The house itself wasn't old, but it carried a heaviness. Some rooms felt normal. Others we avoided without knowing why. Upstairs was the worst. One night, my mom decided to sleep there. Just once. The next morning, she refused to let anyone sleep upstairs again. She forced the entire family to sleep in one room downstairs. No explanations. Years later, I asked her why, and she said, "I knew I wasn't alone. There were multiple things in the room with me. I could feel them moving, fast. They would pass by my face so quickly that I could feel the air shift. I felt so drained, so uneasy. At that moment, I realized that my kids should not be sleeping there." That was all she would say. But we already knew the house wasn't normal. Objects moved on their own. A hoodie flew across the room when no one was near it. My sister woke up one night, fully dressed for school, swearing someone had woken her, only to realize it was 3 a.m. Then, there was the night I sleepwalked to the most haunted part of the house. I was never a sleepwalker. But one night, my brother found me in the guest house bathroom, the one place in the house that always felt cursed. I was curled up on the floor, crying in my sleep. He carried me back to bed. I didn't wake up until morning. I don't remember anything. But my body led me straight there. Then came the dreams. There was always a woman covered in black, her face hidden beneath a veil. She would whisper in a language I didn't recognize. The more she spoke, the more I felt paralyzed. I wasn't just scared, I was trapped inside my own body. Then, a cat appeared. It jumped onto me and spoke, "Seek forgiveness from your Lord so you can wake up." The second I forced the words out, I woke up. That should have been the end of it, except that I had seen this exact cat before. In real life. It used to watch me from the backyard, always sitting in the same spot, completely still. I tried to scare it away, but it never reacted. It never moved. Was it protecting me? Or was it waiting for something? Years after we had already moved out of the house, I had another dream. I saw that same cat again. This time, it wasn't sitting in the backyard. It was walking through the desert, exhausted, like it had been traveling for miles. When it reached me, it spoke again, "I'm going to tell you something, and you decide what you want to do with this information." I told it to speak, and it said, "Look after your uncle." Then it disappeared. I woke up confused. I hadn't thought about that cat, the house, or my uncle in years. But when I told my mom about the dream, she froze. She said, "Your uncle has been sleeping in our old house for a week now." I still don't know what to make of that. The last dream I had about the house was different. It was daylight. The sun was shining. But she was still there, the black-veiled woman. She stood in the same cursed spot as always. But this time, I focused not on her but on the place itself. And then it struck me, everything that occurred was due to this spot. The second I realized it, she lost it. She didn't whisper spells this time. She didn't try to paralyze me. She screamed at me. She did not use a demonic voice, instead, she swore at me in Arabic, using a woman's voice. She was furious. It was like she had been waiting for someone to figure it out. And now that I had, even in a dream, she snapped. I woke up feeling drained but not scared. It was the first time I felt like I understood something. The peculiar aspect is that, despite relocating years ago, I continue to have dreams about the house, None of my family members do. But I still do. The house persistently manifests in my dreams, and on each occasion, it appears to be awaiting my arrival. Like I never really left. And I don't know why. Any thoughts? This is a long story to explain why I believe unsettling things occur at 3 a.m. I have been studying the occult and supernatural since 2008. I have seen and experienced with my own eyes that evil disguises itself as good and light. I have witnessed with my own eyes that calling upon Jesus breaks the illusion of evil spirits pretending to be good. During my searching adventures of spirituality over the past 18 years, I have come to see that indeed, Jesus Christ has authority over all evil, and that was never what I set out to accomplish. I just wanted to know the truth about life. I didn't think truth was an actual person/being. During all of my previous investigations without Jesus, I experienced nightmares, sleep paralysis, and paranormal events. However, these experiences only led to more questions and information without ever providing a true resolution. Not only that, I continued to get more distressed and depressed, and it was like I still wasn't coming to an answer. Just more continual goose chases that left me with more questions. It began to feel like a game, at the expense of me, since there would be bouts of clarity, but then boom, it all gets taken away at some point, and I start from square one. One night it changed, though. During this sleep paralysis event I felt and saw true evil beyond what I thought was possible. It's as if you've looked at something your whole life, you think you know what it is, you think you know what it looks like or feels like, but then you experience it for the first time, and it then rewrites everything you thought you knew. This was around 3 a.m. I woke up in my room, awake, not dreaming, but completely unable to move. I've experienced this countless times before, but this time I felt pure evil. I can't describe it any other way than that. Pure danger, pure evil, pure hatred. Once you actually feel it, all the people you thought you hated or thought were mean to you or hated you get wiped off the map. Not even comparable. Even if someone did disgusting, terrible things to you, which they have to me, it did not compare to this feeling. Anyway, I look into my doorway, and there is this shape of a human, but made of darkness like a mist or gas, undulating at unknown speeds. It was accompanied by a deep, consistent guttural growl-type noise, very similar to the clicking noise used in horror movies, where a supernatural creature is stalking you. It comes up right to my face, and I cannot move or escape. I keep trying to say mantras, positive things in my head, telling them to go away, all that jazz. Nothing happens. It just gets closer to my face, so close it's inches away, and it's like a vortex of hell and darkness coming from this thing's face. I manage to turn my head slightly and face the wall so I don't have to look at it. Then out of my mattress comes an image of my boyfriend's face at the time, impaled, dead, smiling ear to ear, and laughing at me and mocking me. As his face comes out of the mattress, I see he has the body of a snake, like his head is impaled on the snake's body. In this moment I am truly terrified, because it was the love of my life, pictured and customized into the worst thing I have ever seen, coupled with all the other scary shit moments before. My insides went into flight or fight mode as I sensed danger, and my mind was flipping through anything in my memory to think of to help make this stop. I remember someone once told me Saint Michael was a protector, so I recited that name 3 times in my mind, and immediately on the 3rd time, I woke up immediately. This has never happened during any sleep paralysis I have had, and it all went away. This was the moment I realized there is something much larger than what I can think of occurring, and I do not have the power I thought I did. I began reading about Saint Michael and how he is a heavenly angel who combats evil. Not only that, but he is the commander of heaven's armies. Well, after seeing and experiencing what I did, I continued to investigate, since my worldview was starting to crack and break. In the New Age, you have the power, but I did not have any power over this evil thing, but just saying the name Saint Michael 3 times did. Saint Michael is an angel of God, but Jesus is the King of angels. If it's all true, Jesus, the Bible, the Gospel, then evil must bow down to the name of Jesus and heavenly angels who work for God. The Bible says the crucifixion, the moment Jesus' blood was spilled, sealed the destiny of all evil. That moment, all the demons were defeated by his blood, by his name, by his death, and then, by his resurrection. Demons are only running out of time before they are cast into the pit of fire. They are not invited into eternity with God. They are cast to eternity without God. This is true death. They are going to eternal death when time runs out. This was made complete and set when Jesus died on the cross. It was sealed that humans have authority over demons, death, and deception through Jesus Christ. His blood matters and holds weight in the universal order because he was the first and only human to never commit evil, and he did it for all of humanity. It applies to all who accept. So, if this is true, Then what demons fear the most is that moment on the cross. That moment affected all of eternity and humanity and created things. It was a decision made outside of time and space that played out and occurred in time and space, so those who are living in it will have a way out in the end. The moment was so powerful and final that there is no going back from it. From this point forward, one can only realize its truth and power. It was the moment of all moments for humanity. Moments happen in time. And what time was Jesus' death? The moment the fate of the demons was sealed to eternal death. 3 p.m. What is the opposite of 3 p.m.? 3 a.m. It's the farthest place in the dimension of time that the demons can try to deceive, capture, and lie to human souls. It's also a mockery of Jesus' death as they try to influence non-believers with spooky things in the night. When Jesus died on the cross at 3 p.m., the world went dark. At 3 a.m., demons try to bring light to the dark world so you will focus on the opposite of the truth, Jesus. They aim to lead you on yet another irrational journey away from the one thing that can provide you with peace and clarity in this chaotic world. Try to make you search for the truth in the night, at 3 a.m., unguarded, without Jesus. Demons are aware that we seek answers, observe changes, and attempt to find secret meanings or paths based on the timing of events. If they can make that happen in places farthest from Jesus, they can get us to waste our time on a problem that was already solved 2,000 years ago. All they have left for them is torment, and they hate that we were saved that day at 3 p.m., and they will try every shape, form, activity, noise, visual, or anything else to get us to notice them and not God, who has already sealed their fate. Does anyone else see anything like this? It started off as a normal day, nothing out of the odd, waking up late as every 14 to 15-year-old does during summer break. I wake up, grab a drink, and go out with some friends after a shower. We'll call this event In Town Days only because I don't want to reveal the town it was in. I got invited to hang out with two of my friends. We walked around the town a little bit, and we bought a lighter and a knife since we're dumb teenagers and we're young. We never used the lighters and only really goofed around with the knife. As the day passed, I and my two friends eventually went to anonymous grandma's house. It was my first night ever being there, and it was one of the worst by far. This town exudes a haunted atmosphere, with numerous old buildings and only a single new building, a motel. Anyways, that's not the point. We're all cooped up in his grandma's house for the night. Now we're young teenagers, and we're going to stay up and play video games and have some fun. We made some stupid prank calls that never got us in trouble, but I know we annoyed some people. Looking back at it, we were just young and dumb. Time passes by, and we start hearing some unusual sounds from upstairs. We think nothing of it because obviously they're his grandparents, or so we thought. The night goes by, and eventually we start hearing them louder and louder, and we get a little bit more concerned. Concerned enough to the point we moved into the only bedroom that's downstairs and all got in close in the one queen-sized bed. We get in bed and pull the blankets over us so we all stay warm, and it just gets worse as time passes. Eventually the time kept getting closer to 3 a.m. Sounds are still happening, but this one sound truly intrigued me and the guys. There were footsteps from upstairs that had walked out of a room but never went back in. It scared the hell out of us for no reason, as we were all cuddled up in a bed with sheets over us. The footsteps just walked out of a kid's room from upstairs and just stopped. It didn't move back in the room, didn't move to the couch, didn't do anything, just stopped. Dead in its tracks. We're all freaking out at this time. We had never really experienced something paranormal like this before. A little time passed as it inched closer to 3 a.m. At this point, we had calmed down a little since the footsteps. A little bit later, we all three heard a chair move just a tad bit from upstairs. The reason we could tell it was a chair was because it was easy to hear four loud legs move on a wooden floor. I felt so eerie and just out of it after this. You know that feeling of derealization when you feel like you're watching everything from a POV video? That's what it felt like after the chair was moved. Of course, there could have been many different reasons for the chair moving. Perhaps someone got up to get a glass of water, but what was unsettling was that there were footsteps leaving a room and then just standing outside without returning. Keep in mind that not all of this was right after the other. There was a break of 15 plus minutes between each thing. But this last thing is what made me want to cry so hard until I couldn't see. We started goofing around again, in fact mocking whatever was upstairs. It was probably dumb as shit to mock, as it scares me and almost makes me cry anytime I tell this story. Eventually it all came to a stop, no more noises, no more footsteps, no more nothing, and we all thought we were A-okay. We were so wrong. Time came by, I have no idea what exact time it was, but I believe it was almost done being 3 a.m. by now. Given the heat and difficulty in breathing under the blanket, we all believed it was safe to come out from underneath it. We all got out of it and had a sigh of relief just feeling the cooler temp of the room on our faces. Minutes pass, which felt like hours to me, seconds felt like minutes. I can't be certain, but it felt like we had been there longer than we actually were. We all went on our phones and just scrolled TikTok or something. I know we were all kept busy until at some point we all just got off and started talking about really anything. While we talked, it came to the point we all just shut up and went under the blanket on our phones again. The time was around 3:40 to 3:50 when this next thing happened. We all came out from the blanket. A couple of minutes passed while we sat there just laughing and goofing off still in the bed, then at some random point mid-laughing our asses off, I and one of my buddies looked at the doorway, or the entrance of the room, and saw a black figure standing there with a black top hat on, standing about 6 feet 9 inches minus 7 feet tall with a good set of shoulders, and all he was doing was just standing there watching me and the three guys. It didn't do anything at all, it remained completely still and just stared at us. I let out a small little scream and quickly yanked the blanket off my head, as did my buddy, and I started shaking and almost tearing up at the sight I saw. Eventually my buddy told me it's not his first time seeing it, he had done more research on it and said that what we saw was called Shadow Man. Time passed, and we all made a run for it out to the living room area of the basement, and we all just talked it over and eventually fell asleep. To this day, the memory still causes me to tremble and nearly weep, occasionally shedding tears of fear even when I am in the safest environment available to me. Please let me know if I'm going crazy or not, because I still spend nights and hours thinking about this. Skinwalker and out-of-body experience? A few days ago I read a story about a skinwalker, and it caught my interest. I've done nothing for the past 3 days but search online for all the skinwalker stories I can. My fiancé told me I needed to stop having such an interest if they can actually tell when people think/talk about them, but I didn't listen. Last night, we watched Insidious, The Last Key for the first time together. And I don't know if having this movie fresh in my mind is why I had the dream I had or if I seriously experienced an out-of-body experience. Or both. I'm not sure. I promise the movie and the skinwalker tie together, though. I will note, I'm 34 weeks pregnant and wake up every night to use the bathroom. We already believe we have a ghost, which we think is my fiancé's great-grandma, as we live in her old house. We have never felt threatened by this presence but still ignore it in case it is actually something evil. Before going to bed, I use the bathroom, which usually has a musty smell. However, when I entered, I detected an overwhelming scent of sweet pineapples. I asked my fiancé if his great-grandma liked pineapples, and he said yes, and that was that, and we went to bed. Last night I had a dream that I was outside of my body. I could see myself in bed and was standing right next to my bed. I sleep with my fiancé, but I was the only one in bed in my dream. There were two figures at the end of my bed. They were facing each other, but their backs were to me. I couldn't make them out at all. I don't know who they were. I just heard them talking. I'm sorry if this part gets confusing. Throughout the entire time, I felt a strong urge to pee. I was aware, almost as if from a distance, that I needed to get up and pee urgently, but something compelled me to keep trying to sleep while I watched myself toss and turn in an effort to return to slumber. They were talking about how I was in danger, that it was too dangerous for me to wake up right now, and just in general how it wasn't safe. I believe that 3 a.m. is the witching hour. The two figures finally agreed that it was safe, and I immediately snapped awake. I grabbed my phone for a flashlight to walk into the bathroom so I wouldn't wake my fiancé by turning on a light. The time was 4:04 a.m. Which I found super weird, as the witching hour just ended. Another factor is that I have a small square pillow I put under my stomach for support at bedtime. When I woke up at 4:04 a.m., like any other night when I get up to pee, I set the little pillow by my pillow to the left so it stays in the center of the bed so I know where it's at. I had to unplug my phone to take it to the bathroom with me, and the charger dropped onto the floor like normal. So when I walked back into the bedroom, I had the light shining at the ground the whole way so I could grab my charger. My pillow wasn't on the floor. Why would it be? I just mentioned how I set it by my pillow in the center of the bed. When I plug in my phone and turn the flashlight back off, I start patting around the bed looking for my belly pillow, and it's just not there. But I was too tired to care and went back to sleep. The next morning it was on the floor in the exact spot I picked my charger up from. Which makes no sense because I should have seen it last night if it was on the floor. I told my fiancé about my dream, and he thinks I did have an out-of-body experience. We both agreed that the movie may have influenced my dream to some degree, but we also thought that one of the scary demons from the movie should have appeared in my dream if it was indeed inspired by the film, which it wasn't. So we decided I had an out-of-body experience. He asked if it could have been a skinwalker that these people in my dream were talking about. He didn't get into them as much as I did, so I told him what I knew. How they can shapeshift, normally tap on windows, scratch the walls, mimic voices, etc. He said he doesn't know what time it was, but that a noise woke him up last night, but he immediately went back to sleep because we have puppies and a mama dog in the other room. We had the door closed separating us though, and he assumed it was her getting into stuff. I drove my fiancée to work because I had to go to Walmart afterwards, and on the way there, we were still talking about SW and what my dream could have meant. We come around the corner, and there are two doe in the road. They looked normal and immediately jumped out of the road. They didn't stop to stare at us or give us any sort of bad feeling. It was also daylight, and with the weather getting colder, they're going to be moving around. I brushed it off as nothing, but my fiancée doesn't think it's a coincidence at all and thinks that I may have attracted the attention of a SW. We don't live in the woods. We have a wooden fence line, though. Probably about 10 feet worth of trees, but nothing thick at all. Only a few trees and brush cover approximately 5 feet on either side of the fence. We're surrounded by cow fields and even have a field of our own. I've been home by myself all day, and nothing weird or spooky has happened. I've refrained from listening to any more scary stories, as I don't want to be feeding anything negative. When my fiancé gets home, we're going to sweep with salt and cinnamon, salt the windows, and rub olive oil on top of them. And say a lot of positive affirmations out loud together. I feel really bad to think I could have put my family in danger because of my interest. But we live in Arkansas, and I didn't think skinwalkers were common around here or that me just enjoying stories would attract one. I still have no idea what the dream meant. If it was a skinwalker that the figures were trying to warn me about, saying it was dangerous and not safe to wake up, or if the spirit in our house isn't actually his great-grandma. I have no idea. Ghost keeps waking me up at 3 a.m. I know who it is and can't stop it. My husband comes from a family with a long history of conflicts among its members. I knew what I was marrying into, and we decided a long time ago that he would deal with his family and I would deal with my family. Neither family is perfect, and neither are we. We had a big problem with his mother and his grandmother. Grandmother is from his father's side of the family. They really teamed up hard against us and caused some problems for us when our oldest was born. Our oldest is intellectually disabled but a complete joy to be around. But they had ideas and opinions when none were needed, and it blew up into a nasty fight, and my husband walked away from his family and went no contact. They blame me for the no contact, but it was his choice. He knows I support him, and I have encouraged him to try to work it out with his family, but he has no interest. I can't force him to try to talk to them, as it is his choice, but the best I can do right now is tell him that I will stand by him in whatever choice he makes. If he wants to stay no contact, okay. If he wants to get in touch with them, I will be right there beside him. It's a terrible thing to go no contact with your family. But I do understand his reasons for doing so. So, 3 weeks ago I was sitting all cozy in our living room with our children, and we were just hanging out reading. My husband is in his office working, and I get a very intense feeling that I need to look online for his grandmother. Just Google her name and see what comes up. Yes, this kind of thing has happened to me in the past. No, I don't discuss it because when I have, I get the "oh, you are some kind of crazy witch" of Endor reaction. Well, sure enough, I found his grandmother's obit online. She had passed away 3 days earlier. And I had to go tell him why I even checked in the first place. He knows I have these, shall we say, episodes? And takes it pretty well. So to the problem. Now I'm being woken up every night between 3 a.m. and 3:06 a.m. Every night. When I wake up, there is a chill in the air, and I can feel her presence in the house. I know it's her. No, it's not the air coming on. I already checked the HVAC system. It's all online, and I know when it's on and when it's off. It isn't a barking dog that is waking me up, nor is it my husband snoring or my kids making any noise. I believe it is her, I am certain of that. I've tried some prayers I have used in the past to make entities leave, and they aren't working this time. I am not scared, I am irritated. I have been waking up at 3 a.m. for the past 3 weeks, and it is getting old. I need ideas or help on how to get her to move on to where she needs to be, which is not in our house at 3 a.m. Please tell me someone else has had this problem. Banging on my window at 3 a.m. Hi. I am a 21-year-old female, and I would like to know what you all think about this experience. There was a night a couple of weeks ago that I can't quit thinking about. I was in the midst of finals and stayed up very late studying each night. The average time I would go to bed was between 1 and 2 a.m. This particular night I went to bed at about 1 a.m. after studying all night. I slept until I suddenly woke up at around 2:55 a.m. I do this naturally from time to time. I tend to wake at random times in the night. So this sudden wake didn't concern me. I picked up my phone and just looked a bit through social media until I could go back to sleep, as I usually do. 3 a.m. came around, and I thought I heard footsteps walking around outside and eventually up to my window. Again, I did not think much of this either, as my neighbors have many free-roaming dogs and cats that tend to walk up to my window during all times of the day and night. I initially thought it was an animal, as I usually do, until 5 rapid and consecutive bangs on my window startled me. It sounded as if someone had walked up and was hitting my window with full force. I dropped my phone and froze. I realized that the footsteps may not have been an animal. I didn't know what to do. My bed is parallel to my window, so I was practically lying 3 feet from whoever or whatever this was. I didn't want to stand up in fear of what might happen. I was scared the thing might have a weapon and would be waiting on me to react and get up. But I'm not sure if it was someone at all. I listened closely for footsteps that sounded like walking away. Nothing. I lay in my bed paralyzed and petrified. Eventually my exhaustion overcame my fear, and I fell asleep. When I woke in the morning, I ran and asked my mom if she had heard anything. I was hoping it was a dream. She obviously freaked out when I told her the entire story and insisted that I sit down to explain it to my dad. He went to go check outside, even though it had been hours since. He found nothing. My mom later admitted she had heard something, but she assumed something had fallen over in the night, as if something was set down on an unsteady surface and was slowly falling until it gave into the pressure and fell over. I tried to be careful for the rest of the day. That next night was weird too. I was studying late at night again and heard something walking around. But no banging this time. I thought I heard it walking towards the front door of my house. But nothing happened. I brushed it off. Everything has settled down since then. But recently I feel as if something is in my room watching me. I have no proof, I just have this eerie feeling something has its eyes on me. I just wanted to share this experience, and I welcome and appreciate any thoughts you may have. Unwanted visitor in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m. This is a true story that happened last night while I was at my grandma's house. So before this all took place, I went to get McDonald's in the nearest city to us, which is about 20 minutes away. After that I decided to go down to my grandma's house instead of going straight home. For context, she lives down a long farm road to which you also have to turn off down a half-mile dirt driveway just to get to her house. I arrived there at around 9 p.m., and I went in and visited with my grandmother and my brother, who lives with her ever since my grandpa passed away, so that she won't have to live down there all alone. My brother and I took out my grandma's dog to pee around 10:30 p.m., and we just sat outside listening to music and talked for a while. At that point I was starting to get cold because this is East Texas, and I am not yet used to it getting down into the low 40s at night, so I was about ready to head inside. I noticed something moving in the corner of my eye near the large metal shop that sits a few hundred yards from the house. I didn't really take too much notice though because it is not uncommon for deer or raccoons to come snooping around in the yard, and plus my grandma's dog wasn't barking, so I thought that it might have just been my eyes playing tricks on me. We finally headed back inside, and my grandma went to sleep around 11 p.m., so my brother and I stayed up and played Among Us and watched YouTube for a while. At around 2:30 a.m. I was very tired and ready to go home, so I asked my brother to walk with me to the door and make sure that I get out to my car because I am always very paranoid, especially at night. He joked around and said that he would turn the light off on me and lock the door, and I freaked out and begged him to walk me out to the car, to which he finally humored me. I got in my car and immediately locked the doors, and I saw the porch lights turn off as I was driving off back down the dirt road. I got home within 10 minutes and fixed myself some ice cream before I sat down and enjoyed some creepy horror stories on YouTube. Another 15 or so minutes passed, and I got a FaceTime call from my brother, which I picked up almost immediately. I could tell that he was freaked out about something, but he wasn't saying anything right away, so I asked him what was wrong. The following is my best attempt to paraphrase what my brother told me. He said that after I left, he went back outside to listen to some music and sit on the porch. He had the music on his phone up pretty loud, which would usually mask any noises of animals coming from the nearby woods. After a few minutes of listening to music, he said that he heard what he thought to be sounds of metal banging around, so he quickly paused the music and listened to see if he could hear the sound again. He stood up and looked towards the shop and the boat shed, which are adjacent to each other and are a few hundred yards away from where he was standing. He saw a faint light shining around near the boat shed, but then it quickly flicked off. At this point he was freaking out, so he quietly crept back inside the house and locked the door behind him. He said that he ran to his room in the back of the house, I guess not thinking to wake up our grandma, and he grabbed his revolver. He quickly ran back outside and saw the glow of the flashlight move around and then swiftly shut off as soon as he noticed it. He walked out to the edge of the concrete carport and stared out towards the boat shed with his revolver down at his side. The only thing illuminating the boat shed was the faint light coming from the house. He said that he tried to muster up the most intimidating voice he could manage and said, "Who the hell is out there?" To which there was no immediate reply except for a slight bumping sound, which solidified the fact that someone was indeed there. Now keep in mind this is out in the middle of the country in a town with a population of just over 1,000 people, and the nearest house is across the lake or miles down the farm road, so no well-meaning person would just happen to stumble across my grandma's house this late at night. Also, my grandma has had problems with people snooping around the property in the past, so this is not something any of us take lightly. And for the life of me I can't tell you why my brother didn't just call the police, but you also have to remember that there is literally one cop in our entire town and it is 3 a.m., and so it would take at least 30 minutes for the cops to even show up. So anyway, my brother again called for the person to show themselves and repeated his question and asked them to identify themselves. He said that he practically shit his pants as a tall, lanky figure slowly emerged from the boat shed with a flashlight in hand. Although my brother couldn't see any distinct features about the person, he could definitely tell that it was an older man and that it was no one that we knew. It was especially not anyone that should be in our boat shed at 3 a.m. At this point he raised the revolver up to point at the man and again shouted, "Who the duck are you?" The man was still silent and began slowly walking towards him. My brother pulled back the hammer of the revolver and gave one last verbal warning to the man and said, "I swear I will blow your ducking head off. Now who are you, and why are you here?" The man quickly raised his hands up and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, calm down, man," in a taunting voice as he continued walking towards my brother. My brother fired a single shot just above the man's head, to which he finally took that as his cue that my brother meant business. The man hurriedly took off on foot back down the driveway, and my brother screamed, "Next time I won't." My brother then quickly ran inside to wake up my grandma, who had somehow slept through the entire commotion. She didn't seem worried enough to actually call the police, but of course after hearing this, all I could think about was what were the true intentions of that man? Was he just some meth head snooping around looking to steal some tools for drug money? Or were his intentions much more sinister? Another question that haunts me about this whole situation is, how many times has this happened after my grandma and brother went to bed, and we just didn't know? And was he watching us from the shadows all night? Was he watching me as I walked out to my car? What would have happened if my brother had actually turned out the lights and locked the door before I could get to my car? So to the stranger who tried to rob us or do God knows what at 3 o'clock in the morning, I hope you learned your lesson. Crying baby, knocking, toilets flushing at 3 a.m. This happened back in 2018 to 2019 at my college apartment at the University of North Texas, UNT. This was student housing right outside of the UF Cemetery, which is a couple of blocks long, and many students will cut through to arrive to campus. I shared my apartment with my roommate, let's call her M, on the top floor. When you walked in, there was the kitchen and then the living room further in. We each had our own bedroom, mine to the left and hers to the right of the main space. Our personal rooms had separate locks because we were technically paying separately, like two dorms. Her room touched our neighbors, and the back wall had a window facing our view of the pool and the cemetery. My room touched the outdoor hallway/breezeway and also had a window on the back wall facing the pool and cemetery. Both rooms also had their own bathrooms and closets. Also, we were unable to get into each other's personal bedrooms because they had separate keys from the main apartment key. One of the first instances happened over the weekend for me. M usually went home, and I sometimes stayed at the apartment to study, hang out, etc. This instance, I walked in and noticed her light was on and heard movement all inside her bedroom. I called out to say hey and tell her I was there, but no answer. I thought nothing of it and continued doing my own thing. M later texts me asking if she had left her charger there, meaning she wasn't there. I definitely freaked out and ended up getting someone from the apartment to come check her room because at this point I suspected a break-in or something crazy. Well, no one ended up being in there, and I ended up going back home to my house early, ha. This continued for weeks, where I would see her lights turn on and off when she wasn't there, both during the day and night. What was much worse started happening about halfway through our year there. My bed faces away from my bathroom and toward the outer window in my room. At night, I would hear my toilet flush multiple times. My dad and the apartment staff both ended up checking it, but nothing appeared to be physically wrong with the toilet itself. When the toilet flushed, I began checking the time and noticed that it was always between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Shortly after the flushing started, Em and I both would hear knocking. It always sounded like it came from the outer wall, overlooking the pool and cemetery, rather than the inner wall against the hallway. It would always be 3 knocks, again at nighttime. Em had brought up that she was hearing it, and that honestly made me more nervous because it meant I wasn't just dreaming it up after being freaked out by everything else. To me, the scariest part happened right before we moved out for the school year. Thankfully, we only had a few weeks left at this point. Around that same time window, I would hear a baby crying. Initially, I would wake up and assume it was around 10 p.m., thinking that a neighbor might have taken her baby to the pool to avoid waking anyone inside. However, once I gathered the courage to check the actual time, I realized it was much later, specifically during that 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. window. I asked Em if she heard it too, and she told me yes, but only once or twice at this point. So one night we ended up staying awake until 3 a.m. to see if we could hear anything, and we heard the knocking but no crying. However, the next day our AC went out, not sure if that's related lol, and Em and I both heard the crying the next couple of nights. Em and I ended up doing some research about attachments and cleansing the apartment after this. We only had a couple weeks left, but we honestly didn't want the next girls to have to experience this either. Em was a little more knowledgeable about it all and did a sage cleanse, and we bought a crucifix for the door as well. After these cleansings, the electrical issues, knocking, flushing, and crying all stopped. We had only like 2 weeks left at this point, so I'm hoping it truly was gone from the apartment for the next tenants. Ultimately, Em and I kind of drifted apart after graduation and COVID, but it was definitely a bonding experience when it happened lol. I hope she is doing okay and free of any attachments like we experienced. I'm sharing this to gather your thoughts on what it could have been and whether we did anything right or wrong during the experience. Furthermore, I'm curious if anyone knows anything about that cemetery and area in Denton, Texas, so please feel free to share. I appreciate all of you and hope that this story can potentially help someone else out there. The experience still scares me to this day, so please be kind. Experiences from working in a care home. When I was 18, I worked nights at a beautiful old care home, just outside of the town that I lived in. The home itself was situated high up on a hill and very isolated. Nothing but fields and hills around. I think it was maybe a few hundred years old? Built on 3 levels, with 2 specialized wards for residents with severe dementia. It was my first job, outside of a little Saturday stint working as a cashier. I was very sensitive and shy, and from the first moment I walked in there, I felt overwhelmed. There was a lot of sadness in that place, as well as this feeling of deep calm. I can't describe it well, but sometimes the atmosphere felt so thick and heavy it was like walking through soup. I worked nights with a small team of people. It was our job to make sure that everyone got to bed safely, cleanly, and comfortably. We would also keep an ear out for anyone ringing bells or buzzers in the night. On the walk was an intercom system. The number of the room that had rung would flash up. Of course, during my time there, we did have a few people that passed away. One, as I was cleaning her room, which really shook me up. However, one of the strangest things happened after a little old lady passed away in a downstairs room. On the night I worked, the room was empty, as it was being prepped for someone new to move in. We had finished our rounds and were all in the large common room when the intercom flashed up with the room number of the lady who had passed. We were a little confused but wondered if another resident had wandered in and pressed the button. Upon checking, the room was empty, and all of the residents on that ward were seemingly asleep in bed. The buzzer for that room rang maybe 4 times that night, and apparently the next night too. I wasn't on shift. One of the ladies I worked with had a real dislike of the downstairs area. You had to walk through this really cool glass atrium-style passage to get to the lower level of the building, which was where all of the residents with severe dementia lived. The doors to the atrium were locked, for safety, and there were usually 2 members of staff situated down there at all times. This particular lady hated being put on shift down there. She told me she would often hear doors opening and shutting when everyone was asleep and once had felt a hand on her shoulder when no one had been sitting with her. The home cat, who was a lovely, gentle little thing, would hiss, spit, and claw if someone tried to take him near to that ward. Personally, I also hated being down there, as it felt very dark and oppressive. Maybe just as it was a basement? The last thing is less paranormal and just a bit creepy. There was a lady in room 45, I remember, as I used to dread seeing that number flash up. She would always ask for me if I was on shift. Unfortunately, she was a huge lady with limited mobility, so she often needed help with moving to use the loo, which is when she would call for me. Her room was filled, and I mean filled from wall to floor, with dolls. They even covered her bed so that when she slept, they were over her like a blanket. When I went up to help her, she would grip my arm, look me straight in the eye, and tell me about her husband, who was in the room and who was getting her pregnant. For a young, naive 18-year-old girl, this really used to scare me. I would help her into bed after, and she would often try and get me to stay to change the baby or talk about the people that lived in her room. I understood that her behavior was all due to dementia, but it still unsettled me. I hated being in there at 3 a.m. Odd story from my stay in a small town. After graduating from college in 2007, I received an offer to work as an administrator in a small town, collaborating with local law enforcement. The contract lasted for 6 months and offered a good salary, so within a week, I accepted the job, found a furnished place to live, and left for my adventure. The town had just over 15,000 people, and the apartment I chose was on the top floor of a 3-story building that was built in the 1960s. It was quite large and had nice hardwood floors. The walls were somewhat thin, and I heard my neighbor a few times, especially at night when it was quiet. When I first got there, I knocked a few times with the intention to introduce myself, but they never answered even though I thought I had heard them inside. After a week I assumed maybe it was a reclusive person, so I slipped a note under the door saying hello. I worked with the same officers all the time on rotating shifts, and 3 weeks into my stay I was into the afternoon shifts, which meant I was getting home around 2 a.m. As I came down the hallway of the building, I saw a light coming from under my neighbor's door and saw the shadow of feet under the door, and the peephole went dark as if they heard me and were looking to see who was in the hall. I figured if they wanted to say hello, they would have opened the door, so I simply waved hello and went into my apartment. Over the next couple of weeks this happened 3 to 4 times again. I was pretty sure I had a reclusive but nosy neighbor. Then one night after work I crawled into bed at 3 a.m. and could hear that my neighbor was moving around in the room of theirs that adjoined my bedroom. About 10 minutes later, the noises became louder, which started to worry me. They had never been this loud, and it almost sounded as if they were being attacked or having a heart attack and knocking things over. I ran out of the apartment and started knocking loudly on their door, but they didn't answer. I called out to them, saying I was worried about them, and if they didn't answer, I would call for help. Still no answer. I ran back into my apartment and could hear bangs through the wall, so I called the police station and asked my coworker to send an officer over. I went and knocked on my neighbor's door one more time, but there was no answer, and then headed down to the lobby to wait for the officer, who showed up within 5 minutes. I had gotten to know him a bit, and we went up and knocked on the door, but still no answer. I took him into my apartment, and we could still hear loud thumps every 5 to 10 seconds, followed by a huge bang. The officer asked if I could go get the building manager to open the door. She lived 1 block away, so I said I'd run over and get her. Luckily she was a night owl and watching TV. I told her that my neighbor was being really loud and wouldn't answer the door, so she grabbed the keys and we headed over. The officer was waiting for us in the lobby, and she asked which apartment it was, and I told her 304. She looked at me weirdly and said 304 was empty. I said I had heard my neighbor making noise nearly every day and had seen the light on and shadows under the door a few times. The officer said he heard the noises too and asked if 304 was the apartment that was above the carport, and she said yes. He replied that someone could easily climb up onto the carport and perhaps there were squatters in the empty apartment. We went up, and the manager unlocked the door, and the officer opened it. The apartment was dark, and he turned the light on. He went in, and the manager and I were peeking in through the doorway. He went into the bedroom and came back out and said it was empty. We went in, and the place was spotless. All but 2 of the windows were locked, and there was no sign of squatters. We all just stood there scratching our heads. The officer looked at me and said, "You're not crazy, I heard the banging too." I said maybe we scared them off, and they had come and gone through the unlocked windows. We double-checked that all windows were locked and headed out. On our way out I looked down, and there on the floor was the note I had slipped under the door a few weeks earlier. We secured the apartment, and I pledged to monitor and contact them both should I ever notice the light remaining on or hear any noises. Fast forward almost 6 weeks, and I was again on afternoon shifts. I came home at 2 a.m., and there was a light on. I quickly went into my bedroom and could hear thumping from next door. I called the station and asked for an officer to come out and then called my building manager. I slipped down to the lobby and waited for them. A different officer showed up, and I knew him too. My building manager arrived, and all 3 of us headed upstairs. The light was off, and the building manager unlocked the door. The officer went in, and everything checked out. We checked the windows again, and they were still all locked. I apologized and tried to rationalize my behavior by explaining that I had just finished 4 consecutive 14-hour shifts and was tired, but I knew I had seen the light on and heard thumping. 2 weeks later the apartment was rented out, and I got a chance to greet my new neighbors. I told them to keep an eye out because we were sure squatters had been coming in and out, and I relayed the stories to them. During my final week at the station, there was a barbecue, and we discussed the squatters whom no one had ever seen. I told the first officer about the second call out and how all the windows were locked that time, but I knew I had seen the light on and heard thumping next door. He asked if I wanted to hear something funny, and I said sure. He said he was going to tell me earlier but didn't want to freak me out. He proceeded to tell me that 3 months before I moved in, He personally responded to a call to my neighbor's apartment for a very bloody suicide. The person had done the deed but had second thoughts and called for help. When they arrived, the person was unconscious but had obviously panicked, and a chair, lamp, and side table had been knocked over, and there was blood everywhere. Unfortunately, they passed away before getting to the hospital. I just stared at him, and he reminded me he had heard the banging the night I called him over. I asked the building manager about it the day I moved out and asked why she hadn't told me. She laughed and said, "Oh honey, I believe in ghosts, but I wasn't sure if you believed in them too, and I didn't want to scare you. I know you heard and saw things. I believe you, and I doubt it was squatters." Bright light shining onto my bedroom door at 3 a.m. I really want answers about the strange experience I had in September 2022. So I spent the day at my grandparents' house and got home pretty late. I headed to my room to chill for the night and binge watched some films for a while. Around 3 a.m. I see my doorframe light up. The light is so powerful my whole doorframe is shining. I'm frozen on my bed staring at my door, freaking out. I can freak myself out pretty easily, but I tried to be logical in this situation. Something to take note of, I'm the youngest. I live in a full house with my parents and my older brother. My room is directly opposite the stairs. So when you've taken the last step up the stairs, you will be in front of my room. So me trying to stay calm and logical, I thought it was my dad outside shining a torch. A bit of backstory, during this time my dad had bought a new torch and loved to shine it at me and play harmless tricks on me with it. So I thought it had to be him. But it did dawn on me that my dad wouldn't take it this far to be outside my room at 3 a.m. to scare me. I also want to add it's extremely easy to hear people walking around, as my house has many creaks and sounds, so I can easily tell who's walking. I know the sound of each family member's footsteps, if that makes sense. So I'm still staring at the door, barely trying to breathe to see if I can hear someone behind it. My heart was beating so fast, and I couldn't for the life of me build up the courage to open the door, so I put my headphones on and distracted myself with music. After a few minutes, it was gone. The next day I walked into my mom's room and told her about this strange light outside my room and asked if it was Dad, as it really freaked me out. She seemed concerned, as she knew it wasn't my dad, and she could see I was generally upset about it. Now this is where it gets really weird. Jumping around 2 days later, I was talking to my mom, and she was telling me a funny story about my brother saying he thought he saw an alien and was going to get abducted a few nights ago. I know. It sounds ridiculous, right? We all laughed it off. Before I get more into the story, this is the layout of the upstairs of my house. So head up the stairs, my room is directly opposite. Turn your body right, and you have the hallway. A few steps forward on your left is a spare room. Keep walking down the hallway. The bathroom is on the left, and my brother's room is opposite on the right. At the end of the hallway is my parents' room. So my brother explained that he went to go to the bathroom late at night, which is opposite his room. When he came out of the bathroom heading back, he looked down the hallway and saw a bright light outside my room. He explained that the light was so blinding and powerful that he couldn't even see the door to my room. It was like he was looking into a bright void. Now at this point I hadn't told him my story yet, so hearing him talk about it was crazy. The fact he was there at the right time to witness it. He did say he was very tired, so he can't be counted as reliable in this story, but I hadn't been sleeping either, but we both saw it. To end the story, not much happened after that. He went back to bed, as he wasn't processing what was happening as he was so sleepy, so he headed back to bed. But he did think to himself, WTF, did I just see an alien? He said he got an anxious feeling about it, but eventually he didn't recheck it. After I and my brother shared our POVs, we freaked out and came up with every possible solution we could think of. Even my mom got involved, and we were even recreating the night. My dad, he's more of a realist, he will come up with anything that's not pointing towards the supernatural. His best solution was either one. Someone from outside the house was shining a torch inside, but we weren't letting him have that as a solution because with the angle of the window and our blinds, there's absolutely no way the source came from the outside. We even did a test run to prove our point. We made him go outside when it was late and shine a torch through the window, and it had zero effect, but also the strength of this light source was truly insane. It couldn't have been a normal torch. He also used the excuse of a helicopter or something high up shining through, but even so it wouldn't have gotten past the blinds, so again there was no way it was from the outside. His second best solution was a burglary, which got me and my mom worried, but again, what's the logic behind that? So someone broke in, took nothing, went upstairs, shined the brightest and most powerful torch on my door for 5 minutes, and left? Also, we have dogs, so they would have at least barked? I can't let this story go, and I will constantly be kicking myself for not opening the door, but to be honest, if I got the chance to go back, I don't think I could bring myself to open it. If anyone has any solutions at all, I would be so happy to hear them. I saw a sleep paralysis demon and then heard it attacking our downstairs neighbor. This one is tricky to explain. Last night I saw 2 red circles at our window, but they were hazy, like a cloud of moving mist, and kept swaying side to side almost. It went away, and I wasn't afraid of it or anything before I tried to fall asleep. Just dismissed it as seeing a trick of the mind, you know? I have been seeing tons of paranormal activity lately, but I've also been trying my best to be skeptical of everything. I heard screaming while awake last night also, but no one else could hear it when I tried to confirm, as my fiancé was awake at the time and my roomies were asleep. It was very clearly a man's voice in extreme distress, but sort of far away. I think I was trying to put it off as just being the TV at first for the neighbors or something, but I clearly remember not hearing a TV on if I think about it, because our neighbors are usually pretty loud with their systems and the walls are thin for the apartments. I've gotten super great at astral travel lately, so I think it's getting easier to see things in that spirit realm, if you will, even while I'm awake. Not only did I see that red mist before, but I saw my fiancé standing in front of the door screaming without moving his mouth not too long after I had heard the distressed man's voice. I knew my fiancé was right next to me on the bed and wasn't moving, though, so it was really off-putting to see him standing screaming there when he really wasn't. I remember reaching out to my fiancé, and suddenly we both started screaming in that strange internal way. I felt that sleep paralysis as if it were my own, and we both were able to get up and out of it, thankfully. What solidified this experience for me was when he woke up and thanked me for getting him up after I asked him what happened. I did not see the red mist anymore outside our window, but my fiancé said they saw the downstairs neighbor screaming and red circles outside the window, and that's when they also started screaming. I also realized the events took place around 3 a.m. but took place over the course of under 20 minutes. I think I really did see a sleep paralysis demon, and I have a new theory that sleep paralysis demon attacks only happen in the astral state when we are afraid of something. While I was awake, I clearly saw and heard all of this, but I have a slightly different experience when I was drifting or actually asleep. To be in compliance with the rules, I will only share what I witnessed while I was wide awake unless specifically asked. I'm open for any questions, as I love sharing the knowledge. Unexplainable voice? At 3 a.m. I woke up this morning at 3:03 a.m. That is not uncommon. I typically awaken spontaneously between 3 and 4 a.m. and generally proceed to get out of bed. But I woke up, looked at my phone, and noted the time, and then took my earplugs out. I wear earplugs to sleep because I live at the intersection of 2 major highways, and the sound of big rigs like Jake breaking down the hill and souped up 4x4s hitting max RPM with loud exhaust systems going up the hill is too much to sleep through. Everything was calm and quiet at this point, though. After taking my earplugs out, I could hear my wife breathing rhythmically beside me. Out of the blue I heard what sounded like "frey," as if it was an exhale that went on for maybe 10 seconds, going from noticeably audible to just the sound of air escaping. I could still hear my wife's breathing the entire time I was hearing this. In and out. Steady. So I'm 100% sure it wasn't her. As soon as it started, I had strong chills run down my spine that felt like my whole body was locking up like nails on a chalkboard. I don't really scare easily, but this got me pretty good. There are a few things that have happened within the last year that could be notable. The place we live in was sold to us by my wife's dad, and he passed away some months ago from various cancers. Another thing is our neighbor died, over a year ago, as well, and his widow recently agreed to let me buy his truck. She said it would make her feel good to see it and hear it running again and know that I was taking care of it. Although I had a pretty good scare when it happened, I didn't have a bad feeling about it. I was trying to figure out if it had something to do with either of these people. But if so, why the delayed reaction? Like I said, it's been months since my father-in-law died, and the previous owner of the truck died over a year ago, even though I just acquired his truck. My wife and I have had a couple of experiences in the past at another location that I may go into at another time. It's just that this was fresh in my mind still, and I wanted to share. I have a very open mind and know there is so much we don't know that takes place behind the scenes. Anything is possible. The shadows are watching. That time I saw a shadow figure in our home. When my husband and I lived in Florida, we bought a cute little 3-bedroom, 2-bath, ranch-style home as our first. It was not enormous but suited us just fine. We built a huge organic garden that took up about a fourth of the backyard. There was no indication of any presence in the house at first. Over time, however, I started noticing little things that slowly turned into bigger things that I couldn't ignore. There were 2 smaller bedrooms on one side of the house that were our son's rooms. The front room was our younger son's room, and the back room was our older son's room. He was about 3 when we bought the house. The back bedroom always felt strange to me. I wrote it off as me just being weird when we initially moved in. I distinctly remember having the thought that I was glad I didn't have to sleep there and my son was so young that maybe he wouldn't be bothered by it. Wrong. When our son was about 4, he asked me if God wakes us up in the morning. I told him not physically, but metaphorically, yes. I explained it in 4-year-old terms, of course. He said that he wanted to know if God actually wakes us up in the morning. I asked what he meant by wakes us up. My 4-year-old son mentioned that someone tickles his feet in the morning to wake him up. What? It was tough, but I tried not to react in front of him. I told him that God doesn't usually do that and moved on. Thankfully, he didn't ask about it again. There were many nights, before my 3rd son was born, when my oldest would come into our room saying he was scared and couldn't sleep in his room. He would sometimes sneak into our room and use his pillow and blanket to sleep on the floor beside our bed without waking us. Generally speaking, he never really liked his room. There was even a time when I, out of a need for sleep, told him to sleep in our bed while I tried to sleep in his bed. I actually couldn't do it. It felt like someone else was in the room with me the whole time, and I couldn't fall asleep. Thereafter, I was much more lenient about him sleeping in our room. He was very relieved when we had our 3rd son and made that room the nursery. We put bunk beds in the front bedroom and put the 2 older boys in there. Now that the back bedroom was the nursery, that meant that I had to go in there several times throughout the night to nurse my infant son. I was not enthusiastic about that idea, but having my other sons in the front bedroom immediately prevented my son from waking us during the night out of fear. That was helpful since the new baby was already keeping me up with feedings. The feelings of never being alone and always being watched prevailed. It never seemed to affect the baby. He slept a typical infant schedule. However, I dreaded his night feedings. As soon as I stepped out of my bedroom, I felt someone else there. Once I entered the nursery, the air actually felt heavy. It was as if the atmosphere in that room was thicker. I couldn't really distinguish if it felt like dark energy or light. It just felt different from the rest of the house. There were nights when I would constantly look around the room, half expecting to see someone looking back at me. The feeling of being watched was so tangible, it often gave me goosebumps. Then it all came to a head during a typical feeding one night. My baby was probably about 4 months old or so and woke up around 3 a.m. Pretty normal for him. As I sleepily stepped out of my bedroom, I saw a black figure, in the shape of a man, sitting on my couch. The features were definitely the build of a man but perfectly jet black. I couldn't see any defining features, like eyes, mouths, or hair. Just the outline of a man that was solid black. As soon as I saw him, he stood up from the couch and disappeared. It happened so quickly that I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, trying to determine if what I saw was real. I can still see it in my mind's eye today. It was definitely up there with some of the coolest paranormal experiences I've ever had. Of course, my immediate problem was that I had to walk right past my couch and into the nursery to nurse my son. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how much I didn't want to do that in that moment. But, he was crying, and I suddenly wasn't sure if he wanted to be fed or if maybe something had woken him up or messed with him. I rushed in to find him doing his typical hungry cry. He was such a cute little baby boy. He's almost 11 now. I miss those days. Anyway, I got sidetracked. I scooped him up and nursed him, all the while looking around the room and listening intently for anything that didn't sound normal. I felt creeped out and didn't feel alone, but we got through the feeding without further incident. The feelings of being watched and never feeling alone continued until he was sleeping through the night. Thankfully, he never seemed affected by it and stayed in that room until we moved when he was 3.5 years old. My feeling of unease while in that room remained throughout the whole 10 years that we lived there. The second time I saw a shadow figure in that house happened about 2.5 years after the first time. It was the middle of the night, and I guess my husband couldn't sleep. He had gotten out of bed and gone to the living room to read. I woke and opened my eyes to see a male figure standing on the other side of my bedroom, facing me. He was mostly black, but I could see that he was wearing cloth pants, kind of like khakis, and a short-sleeved checkered type shirt. My grandfather had passed away just a couple of months before this, so I thought it was him at first, because those are the type of clothes my grandpa wore. Who knows? Maybe it was. He has visited my dreams since then. I looked down where my hubby should have been lying and put my hand there in order to wake him and tell him to look, only to realize he wasn't there. As soon as I looked back up, the figure turned toward the little door to our back porch, took one step, and disappeared into the door. The whole thing was over in just a moment. After a minute of coming to terms with what I had just seen, I went quickly into the living room and told my husband what I'd seen, still convinced that it was my grandpa. He, of course, said it was a dream and told me to go back to bed. I find it interesting that the figure showed up the one night that my husband was not in the room with me. I do not think that was a coincidence. There have been other strange things happening in the house, too. We had a dog that would bark at our closet in our bedroom for no reason. I don't mean she would bark in a friendly way, either. This was the danger. I don't recognize this person bark/growl. I was actually somewhat grateful when we relocated, despite the house being flawless in every other respect. I still miss our huge organic garden. We went back there a couple of years later and met the family that bought the place. I casually asked how they like it and if anything strange ever happened there. Anyone who has ever seen a scary movie would have asked a million questions at that point. They simply said nothing ever had and moved on in the conversation. I left them with my email address but have never heard from them. I assume they are doing fine and are comfortable in the home. As I've said before, these energies tend to find me. It's possible that whatever was there left when we moved out. I didn't have any major experiences beyond a few whispers in our rental house before we bought the home. We have lived in this house for over 3 years, and recently, we have begun to experience some interesting occurrences here. Happen here now. Sweet dreams. True hauntings. The little boy. I am a 19-year-old girl, and this is my story. I visited my homeland for my brother's wedding in 2013. I was 7 years old at the time. The house I and my family were staying in, which is also our own house, is located near the cemetery area, which is surrounded by trees, abandoned houses that people haven't lived in for years, and very few lights. One night, I walked from my house to my uncle's house, which is located at the end of the street and is a 5-minute walk away. To reach my uncle's house, you must either cross in front of the cemetery or take a longer alternate road. Having lived there for a considerable amount of time, I had become accustomed to it. This night was also my birthday, so I was on my way to my party. I went alone, as everyone else was already at my uncle's place. As I was in front of the cemetery, I saw a shadow that looked like a little boy. By the looks of it, he looked younger than me. No shirt, just black shorts. All I saw was his back. He was just standing there facing the wall in a corner. At that moment, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just a kid playing around while his father or grandfather prayed at the mosque in the middle of the cemetery. So I called out to see if it was someone I knew or not, but he didn't react and just stayed there to see what he does until my mom called me to come inside quick to cut the cake, so I only looked away for a few seconds, and when I looked back into the area where I saw the boy, he wasn't there. I thought maybe he ran away, so I didn't think much of it and proceeded with my day. A few days had passed. There were still a few more days to leave the island and change back to the capital city, where I live, and during this time I stayed on the island. I kept having weird dreams about being followed/chased by something or someone. At that time, the situation was unclear, but it progressively worsened as I began to see the little boy in my dreams. Now I knew that this wasn't normal. So I told my mom about it, and she suggested that I should just pray and do zikr to help it. It stopped happening for that period of time. After I returned to the capital, I became less consistent with my prayers and zikr. I started having these dreams again and still did not continue to perform my prayers and just let it happen. I know, how stupid. The dreams did not stop. I started getting paranoid and started seeing him inside my house. Now, whenever I am alone, he cannot get close to me, but I can sense his presence. I see it, and I feel it. Every time it happens, it feels like he is taking my soul from my body. It feels like the whole house is shaking. Now that I think about it, I realize he has no face at all. After a month of going through this and the physical reactions getting worse, I decided to tell my parents about it, and they brought a man to perform ruqya on me. And that day while he was reciting the Quran, I felt comfortable where I fell asleep. That's what I thought. My mom was there when the event happened. She explained to me that while he was reciting the Quran, I was laughing, and my eyes were shaking, and I was just stiff the whole time, and when he finished, I woke up as if nothing had happened. Now I am completely safe from everything, but I still get checkups done just in case. But all of this still scares me to this day. My God, honest confession of over a decade of living in a haunted family home and seeing what I find out to be called the Hat Man. At about 12 years old, I begin waking up on multiple occasions to my dad shaking me, asking me very seriously if I was up right then and walking around. I say no and become concerned. Alongside that, my house is very strange. We moved there when I was 4. It was built in the 70s in Southern California's Inland Empire. We live in a cul-de-sac where the house is on an acre surrounded by trees on a hillside. It's very creepy outside at night and in the house. So my dad's experiencing something I don't know about yet. All the while my parents are going through a divorce. My dad moves out, I'm left with my mom and older sister. It's hard to recall when things got weird because strange and scary stuff always happened, but I noticed when I had a new friend stay the night at around 13 years old, and he up and left in the morning and didn't wake me. I came to find out he was being tormented by something standing in my doorway watching him as we slept in my room, and he described the person as having a cloak and large hat and described them as one of those shadow people. Never heard of them at the time. He had asked me, "Someone was at your door watching us sleep that night. Did you know or see them? Was it your family?" He was very creeped out, and it was kind of hard for me to take him seriously with what he was saying. So that was weird. All the while I was the new man of the house. My mom worked 2 jobs, and I was homeschooled at this time, so I had until late afternoon to myself, and even when my mom was home, I had free reign. Little things start happening, like I'm in the living room, and I hear cabinets and stuff opening in the kitchen. Once I go in the kitchen, I hear my dog barking in the living room where I just was, and this planter was knocked over, dirt scattered. Couldn't explain it. More things like that happened. Definitely I started to be aware of a presence. So fast forward, I sleep at the end of a hall that's dark, and I begin occasionally waking up to my door that was always closed open and a slight light pouring in, and once I look, I see a rather short silhouette and head peeking into my room around the corner of the threshold, and I'm paralyzed with fear. I get up and pull my light string above my bed as fast as I can, and my door is back shut. I'm sure I thought it was a dream. This happens about 5 more times, and all the while I'm telling my mom about it, and she has never experienced a thing, doesn't really believe me, and doesn't pay much mind other than telling me I'm having bad dreams. Neither has my sister, she hasn't experienced a thing. Then another time I wake up and see light pouring in through the cracks and underneath the door, and I have sleep paralysis, but I can see my door is shut still, so no entity is looking at me, except I see a black cloud misty type of thing seeping through the top crack of my door and collecting, building, and accumulating in the corner of the ceiling. Mind you, it's dark as duck despite the foggy light behind the door in my room already, and this thing is so black that you can see it in pitch black corners. As soon as I regain the ability to move, I freak out and run into my mom's room. I'm about 14 and was so scared I had to sleep with her. We buy sage and bless the house and say a few prayers at that time, and after, things calm down for a while. Meanwhile, my sister is in a church, which I'm not into, nor is my mom. Someone from her church without any prior knowledge tells her that a demon is tormenting her brother. This girl didn't even know she had a sibling. Years later I'm off to live with my dad at 17. We get to talking, and he explains about those times he woke me up in a panic and said that he kept seeing the shadow person that I was seeing. He described waking up to an open door and light pouring in with a short person blacker than black facing him and walking back and forth near the doorway. And him being very frightened. Each time he'd get up and try and find whoever was in the house and usually wake me up to see if it was me. I remember these times of being woken up by my dad in a panic, him asking me, "Were you just up right now?" He said that one time he had been trying to tell my mom what he had been seeing, and she kind of just ignored him and said he's crazy or he's having a dream. He wakes up one time and sees the shadow person at the door in the hallway. Paralyzed with fear, he manages to wake my mom up by nudging her with his hand, and he whispers, "Look, it's there," and my dog is growling on the edge of the bed. I've gotten stories from both sides, my mom and dad, of this incident, and they match up. He's seeing someone stand there with the door open but only sees a shadow, and my dog probably does too. My mom is telling him, "I don't see anything, there's nothing there." She just sees the door shut and nothing but darkness, no feeling or nothing but remembers the dog growling at the door. My dad jumps up quick, turns the light on, and there's nothing. The door is shut. I guess he called a demonologist and explained what was happening after a while, and the guy had a name for it and everything but told my dad, "You don't see a large tall man at the foot of your bed with a cloak and or large hat? About 7 feet tall sometimes." My dad says, "No, only the short one outside the room," and he says, "Well, what you're describing is usually one of a pair of demons. And there's usually a tall man with a strange hat." And has my dad absolutely shook. So the next couple nights, at some point, it happens again. He sees the small guy in the hallway, and he takes a second look to his left and sees what he described as a 7-foot-tall black abyss of a man standing at the foot of his bed, and he's wearing a very abnormally tall top hat and has a cloak on or a trench coat, just standing there. I'm not exactly sure what happened after that. He told me this story some years ago. But that shook me to my core hearing that, because obviously those times when I was experiencing things in the night, if I had taken a second look, I might have seen him too instead of just the short one in the doorway. And it was sort of what my friend had described when I was a kid and he stayed the night. Fast forward. So I move in with a girlfriend at 19 and haven't been to my mom's in a while. She gets pregnant, and we get a small apartment. And things are okay for the most part. After years of reminiscing about this shadow person, my son is 3 now. I have a 1-bedroom downtown, and I pulled the mattress into the living room for movie night in the living room, and we fell asleep in there. My GF left for her job at 1 a.m., I believe, and I am with my son in the living room, and about 10 feet in front of the foot of my bed to the left is the doorway to my bedroom. I wake up around 3 a.m. regularly at this point as well, and it always creeps me out. This time I wake up, and I see light pouring in from my bedroom and a short shadow and person looking at me from around the corner of the door threshold in my bedroom. I'm instantly shocked with fear, but I manage to sit up, and I'm rubbing my eyes, looking back at it over and over, and wondering why it's not going away when I rub my eyes, thinking this can't be happening. No way am I seeing this. Then my son sits up with tired eyes and says, "Dad, make him go away," while pointing in that direction. Baby talk, but he meant to say, "Dad, make him go away," obviously. I'm absolutely shook to my core that I'm seeing this, not believing my eyes, and then my child confirms it. "Yup, I'm seeing this ducking thing again." As soon as I respond and comfort my child, it's gone. I tell my GF, and she's scared as well and knows of the history of my paranormal encounters and everything, but things move forward. We let the lease run out on that apartment last year and weren't ready to move, so we moved in with the in-laws. We don't get along well and never did, so I moved in with my mom and came back to work near my family home, while my girlfriend stayed at her parents' with the kid for their help. Moved back in with my mom 3 months ago. I'm 24 now and haven't been back in almost 7 years. As soon as I returned, I started listening to scary stories online, including tales of shadow people, the Hat Man, and the old hag, so I'm here alone a lot again. It started with one night I came home, it was only me, and I was in my room with my door shut. I heard noises as if someone were home, but I knew there was not. Noises like the fridge opening and slamming shut rather hard, my creaky old cabinets opening and shutting, the microwave, etc., etc. So I get up expecting someone in the kitchen, and nothing. The time is about 2 a.m. I go back to bed and hear it again, and now I'm shook. I'm frozen in fear as I was as a teen when things happened. I hear footsteps all through the house. It sounds like someone's walking from one end of the house down to my room and back. Distinct person footstep sounds back and forth rather fast, too, like someone rushing around to leave for work or something. I'm looking out my window at the driveway, expecting to see my mom's husband's car, like maybe it's him, but no, nothing. I'm scared as duck. I lie back down despite the noise, and I'm being quiet. Whatever it is, I don't want it to know I'm here. I hear this thing walk straight up to my door, and I hope it doesn't enter my head. It was like it knew. I hear it rest some weight against my door, like someone put their hand on the knob and pressed an ear against the door. It's unlocked. I'm frozen in fear and hoping to God the door doesn't open, and I swear I telepathically could sense this thing was contemplating coming in and decided not to and walked away. This was more frightening than the time the black smoke poured in the door, more frightening than when my child saw it too. So the next few nights it's a weekend, my mom and her husband are gone each night, and I'm a night owl. I'm usually up unless I have work in the AM. I'm hearing things regularly, just like what I described. But with my bad relationship with my mom, I didn't want to immediately move back in and then start telling her the house is haunted and have her think I'm on drugs. Even though I know what happened when I was a young teen. I finally, days later, very subtly bring up that I was hearing stuff in the house and in the living room, and did they happen to as well recently? And I had said, "Is there a ghost or something? Has this happened since I left?" And she says absolutely not, never, and makes a joke about how it may be something following me. No more than a night or two later, I fall asleep with no recollection. Usually I have to turn my TV or phone off to go to sleep once I'm tired, so I know generally the time I fell asleep even. This time I remember lying down, on Instagram on my phone, wasting time. I don't remember being tired. The next thing I can remember is the following. I'm dreaming but not aware of it, so I'm terrified. I'm bound with hands behind my back, and I'm in pain, and I'm in a purgatory environment with this large hatted, tall, dense black shadow of a figure of a man standing in front of me, and he's explaining to me for the better part that he's a demon. Exact words I can't recall well, and telling me other things of that sort, and he has a bloody, fleshy, decapitated head in his hand that is a demon head and has horns and fangs, and he makes me take a bite out of it and eat the flesh as I'm in agony. By that time my subconscious says this is ridiculous and it's a dream, so I wake up, but once I wake up, my blinds to my window are swinging around, making a duck ton of noise, and they are right next to me. I sleep under the window alongside the wall, and I know for a fact my window is shut, my door is shut, and there is no draft whatsoever. I get up immediately and am trying to process the dream I was having and why it sounded like someone jumped through my window with the blinds shut and the window shut. I am up now trying to recreate it, and I even open my window and my door and the window in the room of which my door is in and try to create a draft as such to make my blinds move all crazy and make noise, but not even with my window open could I get them to move. And when I say moving, they were making so much noise and swinging around, like I said, as if something had gone crashing into them without breaking my window. I know for a fact my window was shut. I just can't explain why they moved. I don't have a ceiling fan nor any other fan. It gets pretty stagnant as far as air goes. There's no draft in my part of the house, and I still can't explain it, especially considering the dream I was having before that. This brings you up to date. That was approximately 3 weeks ago. Leave a comment, please let me know what you think or if you need any clarification. Thanks.